The kerosene lamp flickered weakly against the gathering darkness. Outside, the wind howled with prehistoric fury, hurling snow against the farmhouse windows like handfuls of fine sand. Inside, 17-year-old Abigail Jenkins gripped the edge of the worn leather couch, her knuckles white, her face contorted in pain. "Breathe, Abby. Just breathe through it." Jack Carson's weathered face was taut with the concern as he placed another log in the old stone fireplace. The electricity had gone out hours ago, leaving them with only firelight and the feeble glow of battery-powered lanterns. Another contraction seized her body. Abby bit her lip to keep from screaming, tasting blood. She wasn't supposed to be in labor, yet the baby wasn't due for another 3 weeks. But the ferocious Wyoming blizzard that had cut them off from the outside world didn't care about due dates. "The phone lines are still down," Martha Sullivan announced, returning from the kitchen with a stack of clean towels and a pot of boiling water. The 65-year-old housekeeper's usual stern expression had been replaced by one of focused determination. "And there's no way an ambulance is getting through those roads. Not tonight." Jack knelt beside Abby, his large calloused hand enveloping hers. His blue eyes, usually distant with memories of things he never spoke about now, locked directly with hers. "Abby, I need you to trust me," he said, his voice steady despite the fear she could sense beneath his words. "I've delivered calves and foals, and I had medical training in the Army. We're going to get through this together." Abby looked into the face of this man who 7 months ago had been a complete stranger. This man who had taken in a pregnant teenager when no one else would. This man who rarely spoke about his feelings, but showed them in countless small acts of kindness. Another contraction ripped through her stronger than before. As the pain tore away her defenses, Abby's mind drifted back to where it had all begun 7 months earlier. The fluorescent lights of the Wyoming Department of Child Services hummed overhead, casting a sickly pallor over 16-year-old Abby's skin. She sat motionless in the uncomfortable plastic chair, one hand resting protectively over her 5-month pregnant belly, the other clutching the frayed strap of her backpack, the only constant companion through 6 different foster homes. Eleanor Williams, a social worker with tired eyes and a kind smile, settled into the chair across from her, a familiar manila folder in hand. Abby already knew what was coming. She'd seen that apologetic expression 7 times before. "The Pattersons have decided not to proceed with the placement," Mrs. Williams said gently. "They felt they weren't equipped to handle your situation." "My situation." Abby's lips curved into a bitter smile. Such a polite way to say no one wanted a pregnant teenager. "That's 8 families in 3 months, Abby said flatly. "I'm setting some kind of record, aren't I, Mrs.? Williams sighed, removing her reading glasses. "Abby, I know this is difficult, but we have to be realistic about your prospects. Most families looking to foster or adopt teenagers aren't prepared for the additional responsibilities that come with a baby." "You mean they want perfect, grateful kids who don't come with complications?" Abby's voice was soft but edged with steel. "Not damaged goods." "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is." Abby stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum. "Everyone sees me as a problem to solve, not a person." "There are other options," Mrs. Williams offered, her voice taking on the practiced calm that Abby had come to hate. "The group home in Cheyenne specializes in supporting young mothers. You could finish your education there, learn parenting skills." "I don't want a group home," Abby interrupted, trying to keep her voice from cracking. "I want what every other kid in foster care wants: a family. Someone who sees me, not just my mistakes." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Abby had been in the system since she was 11 after her mother died of breast cancer. Her father had disappeared years before leaving no forwarding address. For 5 years, she'd bounced from home to home, never staying long enough to unpack her few belongings completely. The pregnancy had happened in her last placement. The Hendersons, their 19-year-old son Tyler, had shown an interest in Abby that had quickly turned predatory. When she'd finally worked up the courage to tell the Hendersons what their son had done, they'd accused her of being manipulative and promiscuous. She'd been removed from their home the next day, branded a troublemaker. Mrs. Williams studied Abby's face for a long moment. "There is one more possibility," she said cautiously. "It's unconventional, and I want you to consider it carefully." Abby's head snapped up, hope and wariness battling in her chest. "What do you mean?" "I received a call yesterday from a rancher outside of Laramie, Jack Carson. He's 54, never married, no children of his own. Mrs. Williams opened another file. He's been approved for adoption for over 2 years, but hasn't found the right match. And he specifically asked for a pregnant teenager. Abby's voice dripped with skepticism. He heard about your situation through our network and expressed interest in meeting you. Mrs. Williams leaned forward. He knows about the baby, Abby. He knows everything: your age, your pregnancy, your history in foster care, and he still wants to meet you. Abby's fingers unconsciously tightened around the strap of her backpack. What's the catch? There's always a catch. No catch exactly, but you need to understand what you'd be getting into. Carson's Creek is a working cattle ranch about 30 miles outside of Laramie. It's remote, the work is demanding, and it would be a complete change from city life. Mrs. Williams paused. Mr. Carson was very clear that he expects anyone living on his ranch to contribute according to their abilities. That would include you, even as you prepare for motherhood. Abby chewed her bottom lip, considering. When can I meet him? For the first time that day, Mrs. Williams smiled. He's driving in from Laramie tomorrow afternoon. He'll be here at 2 o'clock if you're interested. Abby nodded slowly. I want to meet him. A desperate, fragile hope flickered to life inside her. I need to meet him. Jim. That night in the sterile bedroom of her temporary placement, Abby pulled out the tattered composition notebook she kept hidden at the bottom of her backpack. Opening to a fresh page, she began to write, Dear little star, another family said no today. That makes 8. I'm trying not to take it personally, but it's hard. Everyone sees you as a problem, a complication. They don't see how you're the only one who's never left me. Tomorrow, I'm meeting a rancher named Jack Carson. Mrs. Williams says he lives alone on a cattle ranch and knows I'm pregnant, but still wants to meet me. I don't know whether to be hopeful or suspicious. Why would a man in his 50s want to take in a pregnant teenager? What's in it for him? I promise I'll protect you, little star. Whatever happens, I won't let anyone hurt you the way I've been hurt. Somehow I'll find us a home where we both belong. Love your mom still feels weird to write that. Abby closed the notebook, tucking it carefully back into her backpack. She'd started writing letters to her unborn child the day she discovered she was pregnant, her way of processing the fear, anger, and unexpected love she felt for the tiny life growing inside her. She never showed these letters to anyone. They were the one thing that belonged solely to her. Lying back on the narrow bed, Abby placed both hands on her rounded belly, feeling the flutter of movement beneath her palms. Just you and me against the world, little star, she whispered into the darkness. Just you and me. Jack Carson was nothing like Abby had imagined. She'd expected someone imposing, perhaps even intimidating. Instead, the man who rose to greet her in the DCS meeting room was lean and weathered with salt and pepper hair, cut military short, and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore clean, worn jeans, a plaid button-down shirt that looked freshly pressed, and scuffed work boots that had seen better days. You must be Abigail, he said, extending a hand. His voice was deep but quiet, as if he wasn't used to speaking much. I'm Jack Carson. His handshake was firm but gentle, his hands calloused and strong. Abby noticed a jagged scar running across his right forearm, disappearing beneath his rolled-up sleeve. Most people call me Abby, she replied, taking the chair across from him. Mrs. Williams had positioned herself discreetly in the corner, giving them space while maintaining supervision. Abby, then. Jack settled back in his chair, his posture straight but not rigid. I guess you have questions for me. The directness caught her off guard. Most adults danced around difficult topics, especially with teenagers. Jack seemed to prefer laying everything on the table. Why me? Abby asked bluntly. Why would you want to take on a pregnant teenager when you could adopt someone without complications? Jack didn't flinch at her tone. Fair question. He studied her for a moment. I've been approved for adoption for over 2 years, met with 12 potential placements. None of them felt right. And a pregnant teenager feels right. Abby couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. What feels right is offering a home to someone who needs one. Jack's gaze was steady. When I heard about your situation, I recognized something in it. What a charity case. The words came out sharper than Abby intended. A ghost of a smile touched Jack's lips. No, resilience. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me what you want, Abby. Not what you think I want to hear or what your social worker wants you to say. What do you want? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in a long time. I want, Abby hesitated, then decided on honesty. I want to finish school. I want my baby to grow up feeling wanted and safe. I want somewhere that feels like home, not just a place to stay until someone decides I'm too much trouble. Jack nodded, taking in her words. I can offer you a stable home. Education, you'd be homeschooled through an online program until the baby comes. Then we'd figure out arrangements. You'd have your own room, medical care, security. He paused. What I can offer is an easy life. Ranch work is hard. Days start early and late. Weather dictates everything. It's 30 miles to the nearest town of any size. You haven't mentioned the baby, Abby pointed out cautiously. The baby is part of the package, Jack said simply. I'm not offering to take you in despite the pregnancy, Abby. I'm offering to take you in pregnancy included. Abby studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden motives. She found none, only a steady, unwavering gaze that met hers without flinching. I'd like to show you something, Jack said suddenly, reaching into a worn leather satchel beside his chair. He pulled out a small wooden box, its surface smooth from years of handling. Setting it on the table between them, he opened the lid. Inside were letters yellowed with age, folded military photographs, and a tarnished dog tag. On top lay a faded photograph of a much younger Jack in desert camouflage, standing beside a military vehicle with a red cross painted on its side. His arm was around another soldier, both of them squinting against bright sunlight. I served as a combat medic in the Army for 15 years, Jack explained. 4 tours in the Middle East. I saw things that he stopped recalibrating. During my last tour, our unit came across a village that had been caught in crossfire. There was a young woman there, couldn't have been more than 20, in labor with her first child. Abby watched as something flickered behind Jack's eyes, a shadow of old pain. We did everything we could, but we didn't have the right equipment, the right medications. His voice had gone flat, professional. I couldn't save her. Or the baby. The room fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. I'm not looking to replace them, Jack continued after a moment. Nothing could. But when I heard about you, young, pregnant, no place to call home, I thought maybe this time I could help. The honesty of his confession hung in the air between them. Abby felt a tightness in her chest that had nothing to do with pregnancy. This wasn't pity or charity. It was a form of redemption. Jack Carson was trying to save her because he couldn't save that nameless woman and her child. I'm not asking you to decide today, Jack said, closing the wooden box carefully. Take some time, think about it. If you want to visit the ranch first, see if it's somewhere you could imagine living that can be arranged. Abby looked from Jack to Mrs. Williams, then back to Jack. I don't need time, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I want to try ways. For the first time, Jack Carson smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his weathered features and reached his eyes. Then let's get the paperwork started. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of medical appointments, legal documents, and preparation for the biggest change of Abby's life. Jack had returned to Wyoming to make arrangements, but called every other day to check on her and answer her increasingly nervous questions about ranch life. What if I'm terrible at it? Abby asked during one of their phone conversations. What if I can't handle the work or the isolation? Then we'll figure it out together, Jack replied, his voice steady over the crackling connection. I'm not expecting you to transform into a seasoned ranch hand overnight, Abby. I'm expecting you to show up and do your best. That's all anyone can ask. On the day Abby was scheduled to leave for Wyoming, she stood in the parking lot of the DCS building with her backpack and a single duffel bag containing everything she owned. Jack's pickup truck was parked nearby, a practical mud-splattered Ford that had clearly seen years of hard use. Mrs. Williams handed Abby a thick envelope containing her medical records, school transcripts, and legal guardianship papers. Remember, this is a trial placement, she said. If anything doesn't feel right, or if you need help, you call me immediately, day or night. Abby nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the finality of the moment. She was leaving behind everything familiar, not that she had much to leave for a new life with a man she barely knew. Ready? Jack asked, loading her bags into the passenger seat. Abby took one last look at the building where she'd spent so many hours waiting for someone to want her. Ready. The drive to Wyoming took them through changing landscapes that grew more expansive and wild with each mile. Jack pointed out landmarks and shared facts about the land, his quiet voice a steady counterpoint to the classic country music playing softly on the radio. As they crossed the state line into Wyoming, Abby felt a shift in the atmosphere. The sky seemed bigger here, a vast blue dome stretching from horizon to horizon. The land rolled out before them in waves of green and gold dotted with grazing cattle and the occasional cluster of buildings that passed for towns. "Tell me about your ranch," Abby said, breaking a comfortable silence that had settled between them. "Carson's Creek has been in my family for 3 generations," Jack replied, his eyes on the road ahead. "My grandfather bought the original 100 acres in 1932 during the Dust Bowl. Everyone thought he was crazy investing in land when so many were losing their farms. But he had a vision." "What kind of vision?" "He believed in sustainable ranching before it was a buzzword, worked with the natural cycles of the land instead of against them." Jack's voice held a note of pride. "By the time my father took over in the 60s, Carson's Creek had grown to 200 acres. We raised grass-fed cattle, mainly about 250 head right now. Used to be more, but the drought these past few years has been hard." Abby watched the countryside pass by, trying to imagine herself as part of this landscape. "Do you live there alone?" "Mostly. Martha Sullivan comes in daily to help with the house and cooking. She's been with the ranch since before I came back from my last deployment." Jack glanced at Abby. "Fair warning, Martha can seem a bit stern at first, but she's solid, reliable." "When did you come back from the army?" Abby asked, curious about the timeline of Jack's life. A shadow passed over his face. "Officially retired 8 years ago, came back to take over the ranch when my father's health started failing." There was something in his tone that suggested more to the story, but Abby didn't press. They all had parts of their past they preferred not to discuss. As the afternoon light began to soften, Jack turned onto a gravel road that seemed to stretch endlessly toward distant mountains. A wooden sign, weathered but well-maintained, marked the entrance: Carson's Creek Ranch Estate, 1932. The ranch house appeared gradually as they crested a small rise, and Abby's breath caught in her throat. It was larger than she'd expected, a 2-story structure built of logs and stone, with a wraparound porch and large windows that gleamed in the late afternoon sun. Outbuildings dotted the landscape around it, and she could see cattle grazing in distant pastures. "It's beautiful," Abby whispered. "It's home," Jack replied simply. As they pulled up to the house, a woman emerged from the front door. She was tall and straight-backed, with silver hair pulled into a practical bun, and clothes that spoke of outdoor work: jeans, a flannel shirt, sturdy boots. "That's Martha," Jack said, parking the truck. Martha Sullivan approached with measured steps, her expression unreadable. Up close, Abby could see the deep lines etched around her mouth and eyes, signs of a life that hadn't always been easy. "You must be Abigail." Martha said, her voice neither warm nor cold, simply matter-of-fact. "Welcome to Carson's Creek." "Thank you," Abby replied, suddenly feeling very young and very pregnant. "Please call me Abby." Martha nodded once, then turned to Jack. "Dinner will be ready in an hour. I've prepared the east bedroom for her, as you asked." Without waiting for a response, Martha returned to the house, her back straight as a ramrod. "She's direct," Abby observed, trying to mask her uncertainty. Jack's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Martha doesn't waste words. Come on, I'll show you to your room. You can rest before dinner, if you'd like." The interior of the house was warm and inviting, with exposed wooden beams, comfortable furniture, and family photographs covering the walls. Jack led Abby upstairs to a large bedroom that had clearly been prepared with care. The walls were painted a soft sage green, and the furniture was sturdy but attractive. A queen-size bed with a handmade quilt, a dresser, a desk positioned beneath a window that overlooked the pastures. A rocking chair sat in the corner, a hand-knit throw draped over its back. "The bathroom's through there," Jack said, indicating a door on the far wall. "Martha stocked it with everything she thought you might need, but if there's anything missing, just say the word." Abby set her backpack on the bed, overwhelmed by the space and the thought that had gone into preparing it. In 5 years of foster care, she'd never had a room this nice, this personal. "Thank you," she said, her voice suddenly thick with emotion. "This is more than I expected." Jack shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. "It's nothing special, just a room." But they both knew it was more than that. It was the first room in years that had been prepared specifically for her, with the understanding that she might stay. "I'll let you get settled," Jack said, moving toward the door. Dinner's at 6. Nothing formal, we eat in the kitchen. If you need anything before then, I'll be in the barn. After he left, Abby sat on the edge of the bed, running her hand over the soft quilt. The enormity of the change in her circumstances suddenly hit her, and tears sprang to her eyes. 7 months pregnant, hundreds of miles from anywhere familiar in the home of a man she barely knew. And yet, for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of something she'd almost forgotten hope. Pulling her notebook from her backpack, Abby began a new letter. Dear little star, we've arrived at Carson's Creek Ranch. It's beautiful, wide open spaces, mountains in the distance, and the biggest sky I've ever seen. The house is nicer than anywhere I've stayed before. I have my own room with a rocking chair by the window. I think that's where I'll hold you when you come. Jack Carson is not what I expected. He's quiet, kind of intense, but not in a scary way. He was a medic in the Army and showed me this box of letters and photos. He told me about trying to save a woman and her baby during the war. I think that's why he's taking us in. He's trying to make up for not being able to save them. I don't know if this will work out, little star. I've learned not to count on anything lasting. But for now, we have a roof over our heads and someone who seems to actually care what happens to us. That's more than we had yesterday. I promise to give this my best shot, for both of us. Love, Mom. Dinner that evening was a simple affair: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and fresh green beans from Martha's garden. The three of them sat around a large wooden table in the kitchen, the silence broken only by the clink of silverware against plates. The chicken is delicious, Abby said, attempting to break the ice. Martha's the best cook in the county, Jack said. One of the many reasons I keep her around. Martha made a dismissive sound, but Abby caught the slight softening around her eyes. Jack would live on coffee and beef jerky if left to his own devices, she said dryly. That's not true, Jack protested mildly. I make a decent scrambled egg. If by decent you mean burnt beyond recognition, then yes. Their easy back and forth revealed a comfortable familiarity that came from years of working together. Abby watched them, trying to understand the dynamic between the taciturn rancher and his stern housekeeper. Abby, Martha said suddenly, Jack tells me you're due in August. August 15th, Abby confirmed, her hand automatically moving to her belly. Though the doctor said first babies are often late. Martha nodded. My daughter was 2 weeks overdue, stubborn from the start. The casual mention of a daughter caught Abby by surprise. Martha didn't strike her as the maternal type. You have children, she asked tentatively. A shadow passed over Martha's face. Had. One daughter, Carolyn. The single word had hung in the air like smoke. Abby immediately regretted her question. I'm sorry, she said softly. Martha's expression closed like a shutter. It was a long time ago. She stood abruptly, gathering the empty plates. There's apple pie for dessert, if you have room. As Martha busied herself at the counter, Jack caught Abby's eye. Later, he mouthed silently. After dinner, Jack suggested showing Abby around the immediate area of the ranch. The evening air was cool but pleasant as they walked, the setting sun painting the landscape in shades of gold and purple. I'm sorry about bringing up Martha's daughter, Abby said once they were out of earshot of the house. I didn't know. No reason you would, Jack replied. Martha lost Caroline in a car accident about 20 years ago. She was 16. Abby felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening breeze. 16, the same age she was now. Is that why she seems distant? Jack considered this. Martha's been through a lot. She started working for my father right after Caroline died, needed something to keep her hands busy, I think. When I came back from my last deployment, she was the one who kept the ranch running while he trailed off. While you what? Abby prompted gently. Jack's jaw tightened. While I got my head on straight, let's just say I didn't come back from Afghanistan in the best shape. Before Abby could ask more, Jack changed the subject. I want to show you the barn. You'll be spending a fair amount of time there once you're settled in. The barn was larger than it appeared from a distance, a cavernous space filled with the comforting smells of hay leather and horses. Several stalls lined one wall, most occupied by horses that regarded them with intelligent curiosity. This is Luna, Jack said, stopping before a stall housing a beautiful Palomino mare. She's particularly good with beginners. When you're ready, she'll teach you everything you need to know about riding. Abby tentatively reached out to stroke Luna's neck, marveling at the softness of her coat and the warmth of her breath. I've never been around horses before. They're good judges of character, Jack observed. Luna seems to like you already. As they continued through the barn, Jack introduced Abby to the other horses. Thunder, a powerful black gelding used for herding cattle, Daisy, a gentle bay mare nearing retirement, and several others whose names and personalities blurred together in Abby's tired mind. In the last stall separated from the others stood a magnificent dapple gray stallion. Unlike the other horses who had approached them with interest, this one remained at the back of his stall, ears flattened against his head. "That's Spirit," Jack said, keeping a respectful distance from the stall door. "He was injured in a barbed wire accident last year. Nearly lost his leg. He's been difficult since then." Abby could see a jagged scar running down the horse's right foreleg, the hair growing back white against the gray. Something about the wariness in the animal's eyes resonated with her. "He's afraid," she said softly. Jack glanced at her, surprised. Most people would say he's mean or dangerous. "No." Abby shook her head. "He's in pain and he's scared it's going to get worse. I know what that looks like." A moment of understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared experience that needed no words. As they walked back toward the house, the sun setting behind the mountains in a blaze of orange and pink, Abby felt something she hadn't experienced in years: peace. The silence here wasn't the oppressive quiet of institutional waiting rooms, but a living silence filled with the sounds of cattle lowing in the distance, wind through the grass, and the rustle of small creatures going about their evening routines. "Jack," Abby said as they reached the porch steps, "why did you really choose me? I mean, the real reason." Jack paused, his hand on the railing. "You want the honest truth?" Abby nodded. "Because when I looked at your file, when I read about everything you'd been through, I saw myself at 14, lost, angry, convinced that nobody could possibly want the mess that came with loving me." Jack's gaze drifted to the distant mountains. "My grandfather saw past all that to the person I could become. I'm hoping I can do the same for you." That night, Abby lay in her new bed, listening to sounds she'd never heard before. No traffic, no sirens, no voices from neighboring apartments. Just the gentle sounds of a ranch settling into evening and the soft movement of her baby responding to her calmer heartbeat. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without crying. The next few weeks established a rhythm that Abby found surprisingly comforting. She woke each morning to the smell of coffee and a bacon drifting up from the kitchen where Martha would be preparing breakfast for the day's work. After eating, she would help with household tasks or tend to the chickens whose demanding personalities never failed to make her laugh. In the afternoons, Jack would take her around the ranch, teaching her about cattle behavior, pasture management, and the endless cycle of maintenance that kept everything running smoothly. Despite her pregnancy, Abby insisted on being useful, and Jack respected her enough not to treat her like she might break. To her surprise, Abby discovered that she had an intuitive understanding of the animals, able to sense their moods and needs in ways that impressed even Jack. "You've got good instincts," he told her one afternoon as she successfully separated an injured cow from the herd for treatment. "That's not something that can be taught." Abby glowed under his praise, unused to having her abilities recognized and valued. In foster care, she'd always felt like she was being evaluated for her potential problems rather than her potential contributions. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The isolation that Jack had warned her about began to weigh on her as the weeks passed. She missed having people her own age to talk to, missed the constant stimulation of city life, missed feeling connected to the larger world. One particularly difficult evening, as spring began to transition into summer, Abby found herself sitting on the porch steps, tears streaming down her face. The baby had been especially active all day, making her uncomfortable and emotional, and she felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the changes in her life. Jack found her there, staring out at the darkening pastures. "Want to talk about it?" he asked, settling beside her on the steps. "What if I made a mistake?" Abby said through her tears. "What if I'm not cut out for this life? What if I'm just running away from my problems instead of solving them?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the darkening pastures. "When I first came back from Afghanistan," he finally said, "I used to walk out to the main road every night. I'd stand there for hours trying to work up the courage to hitchhike to the nearest bar. I'd been sober for 6 months, and every day was a battle not to fall back into old habits." Abby wiped her eyes, surprised by the personal revelation. "What stopped you?" "My father found me out there one night. Didn't say a word, just stood with me for about an hour. Finally, he asked me what I was running toward, not what I was running from. Jack's voice was soft with memory. I realized I didn't have an answer. I wasn't trying to get to something better. I was just trying to get away from something hard. Abby considered this. So what's the difference? Running towards something means you've got a goal, a vision of what you want your life to look like. Running from something means you're letting fear make your decisions. Jack turned to look at her. What are you running toward, Abby? The question struck her like a physical blow. For so long, she'd been in survival mode, moving from crisis to crisis, home to home, just trying to keep her head above water. She'd never had the luxury of thinking about what she actually wanted. I want my baby to grow up feeling secure and loved, she said slowly, thinking it through as she spoke. I want to be someone they can be proud of. I want to build something lasting instead of just surviving day to day. Those sound like good things to run toward, Jack said gently. The question is, can I build those things here? Abby gestured at the ranch spread out before them. Jack didn't rush to convince her. Instead, he let the question hang in the air, giving it the weight it deserved. I can't answer that for you, he finally said, but I think you're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Abby. And I think you've got more courage in your little finger than most people have in their whole body. The simple vote of confidence, delivered without drama or expectation, broke something open inside Abby. She'd been waiting so long for someone to really see her as more than just a problem to solve or a burden to bear. I want to stay, she whispered. I want to try to make this work. Jack smiled and, in a gesture that surprised them both, put his arm around her shoulders in the first spontaneous display of affection he'd shown her. Then that's all we need to know for now. June turned to July, bringing temperatures that made Abby's 7-month pregnant body ache and thunderstorms that transformed the familiar landscape into something wild and primal. Despite the discomfort, she moved through her days with growing confidence, finding satisfaction in mastering new skills and contributing to the ranch's operations. One sweltering afternoon, Abby was in the greenhouse, a dilapidated structure behind the barn that she'd begun rehabilitating as a personal project. Jack had given her permission to use it, seemingly amused by her interest in the neglected space. The greenhouse had once been Martha's domain, but had fallen into disuse over the years. Abby had spent weeks cleaning it out, replacing broken glass and preparing soil beds. Now it housed a promising array of herb seedlings and vegetable plants, basil, thyme, rosemary, tomatoes, peppers, and more. There was something deeply satisfying about coaxing life from tiny seeds, about creating something from almost nothing. When Abby worked in the greenhouse, the worries that constantly circled her mind about the baby, about her future, about whether she could truly belong at Carson's Creek, receded to a manageable distance. She was carefully transplanting basil seedlings when she heard the sound of an approaching vehicle, unusual for a weekday afternoon, when Jack was typically out with the cattle. Setting aside her trowel, Abby made her way back to the main house, one hand supporting her lower back. A sleek black SUV was parked in front of the house, looking absurdly out of place amid the practical ranch vehicles. A man in an expensive-looking suit was speaking with Jack on the porch, his body language assertive, almost aggressive. As Abby approached, she caught fragments of their conversation. Final offer, Carson, 20% above market value. You're not going to get a better deal. And I already told you Townsend, the ranch, isn't for sale. Jack's voice was calm but firm. Not now, not ever. Be reasonable. My father would have shown you the business end of his shotgun for suggesting he sell his heritage. Jack's tone had hardened. Now if we're done here, the man in the suit noticed Abby, then his gaze traveling from her face to her pregnant belly and back again. Something like calculation flickered in his eyes. Well, the rumors are true. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Jack Carson, confirmed bachelor taken in by a pregnant teenager. How very charitable of you. Jack's shoulders tensed, but before he could respond, Abby stepped forward. I'm Abby Jenkins, she said, extending her hand with a politeness that belied the anger bubbling inside her. And you are... The man seemed taken aback by her directness, but recovered quickly. Richard Townsend. Townsend Development. He shook her hand briefly. I'm surprised Jack hasn't mentioned me. We've been discussing a mutually beneficial business arrangement. Mr. Townsend wanted us to buy the ranch to build a luxury resort. Jack explained, his voice neutral. I've explained that Carson's Creek isn't for sale. Everything has a price, my dear, Townsend said smoothly, addressing Abby as if Jack weren't present, especially aging ranches with challenging financial situations. But I'm sure Jack is providing adequately for your needs, despite his circumstances. The condescension in his tone made Abby's blood boil. She recognized the type men who viewed people as assets or liabilities, who assumed their money gave them the right to whatever they wanted. Mr. Townsend, she said, her voice sweet as honey but with steel beneath. I may be young, but I'm not naive. Carson's Creek isn't just land and buildings, it's history and heritage. It's a home. And from what I've seen, the only challenging circumstance around here is standing on the porch in an overpriced suit trying to buy something that isn't for sale. Townsend's expression hardened. I see Jack has found himself a little firebrand. He turned back to Jack. My offer stands until the end of the month. After that, well, banks aren't as patient as they used to be with struggling ranchers. With a final nod that managed to be both polite and threatening, Townsend returned to his SUV and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. I'm sorry, Abby said as the vehicle disappeared down the long driveway. I shouldn't have interfered. Don't be sorry, Jack replied, a hint of admiration in his voice. It's been a long time since anyone stood up for Carson's Creek like that. He mentioned financial problems, Abby said cautiously. Is the ranch in trouble? Jack's expression closed slightly. Nothing for you to worry about. Ranching has always been a business of feast or famine. We've weathered tough times before. But there was something in his tone that nagged at Abby, a tension that hadn't been there before Townsend's visit. That night, after Jack and Martha had gone to bed, Abby found herself unable to sleep. The encounter with Townsend had unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. For the first time since arriving at Carson's Creek, she felt the precariousness of her situation. If the ranch was in financial trouble, what would happen to her and the baby restless? She decided to get a glass of water from the kitchen. As she passed Jack's study, a small room off the main hallway that she'd rarely seen him use, she noticed light seeping from beneath the closed door. Abby hesitated, torn between curiosity and respect for Jack's privacy. The sound of movement from within made the decision for her. Jack was awake, possibly troubled by Townsend's visit as well. She was about to knock when she heard a crash, followed by a string of muffled curses. Concerned, Abby opened the door without thinking. The scene that greeted her was shocking Jack on his knees amid scattered papers and broken glass, his normally composed face twisted in anguish. The room smelled strongly of whiskey, and an empty bottle lay on its side near the wall, as if it had been thrown. Jack, Abby said softly, frozen in the doorway. His head snapped up, eyes wild and unfocused. For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize her. Then awareness returned, followed immediately by shame. Abby, he said roughly, you shouldn't be here. I heard a crash. I was worried. She took a tentative step into the room. Are you hurt? Jack ran a hand over his face, seeming to gather himself with visible effort. No, just go back to bed, please. But Abby couldn't leave him like this. Instead, she knelt carefully beside him, mindful of the broken glass, and began gathering the scattered papers. They were financial documents, bank statements, loan notifications, past due bills. The picture they painted was grim. The ranch is in trouble, she said. It wasn't a question. Jack didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was hollow. 3 years of drought, cattle prices dropping, medical bills from my father's final illness. He gestured at the papers. It adds up. And Townsend knows. Townsend knows, Jack confirmed bitterly. He's been buying up every struggling ranch in the county for his resort project. I'm the last holdout, and he knows exactly how deep the hole is. Abby continued gathering papers, trying to make sense of the numbers. How bad is it? I've got until the end of August to make the next mortgage payment. After that, the bank starts foreclosure proceedings. Jack's laugh was brittle. Ironic timing, isn't it? Just when you're due to have the baby. The implications hit Abby like a physical blow. By the time her baby arrived, she might be homeless again. The sanctuary she'd begun to trust could disappear as quickly as every other home she'd known. I'm sorry, Jack said, seeming to read her thoughts. I should have told you. I thought I could figure something out. I never intended to bring you into a situation that wasn't stable. How long have you known, Abby asked, trying to keep her voice steady, that we were in trouble since before I met you? Jack met her gaze directly. But I still believed that taking you in was the right thing to do, regardless of the ranch's financial situation. I have savings. If worst comes to worst, we'd find somewhere else to live. The "we" caught Abby by surprise. Despite everything, Jack was still thinking of them as a unit, a family of sorts. Is that what tonight was about? She gestured at the broken bottle. Townsend's offer. Jack's expression tightened. Partly. That and... He hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. Some nights are harder than others. Memories. Things I saw in the war. Things I did. PTSD, Abby said softly. Jack looked surprised. You know about that? We studied it in psychology class last year. Abby shrugged. Plus, I've lived with enough foster parents with issues to recognize the signs. I haven't had a drink in 8 years, Jack said, his voice low with shame. Tonight was a near miss. Abby glanced at the broken bottle. Did you throw it instead of drinking it? A nod. Then it wasn't a miss at all. It was a win. Abby placed her hand on Jack's arm. You're allowed to struggle, Jack. You're allowed to have bad days. What matters is what you do when they come. Jack stared at her, something like wonder dawning in his eyes. How did you get so wise for 16, 17 now? Abby corrected with a small smile. Her birthday had passed quietly the week before, marked by a homemade cake from Martha and a gift from Jack, a beautiful leather-bound journal with her initials embossed on the cover. And I'm not wise, just experienced in certain things. Together they finished gathering the papers and cleaning up the broken glass. The act of putting the room back in order seemed to calm Jack, restoring some of his usual composure. We'll figure this out, Abby said as they finished. The ranch, the finances, all of it. We're not giving up. Jack studied her for a long moment. No, he agreed finally. We're not giving up. As Abby returned to her room, her mind raced with what she'd learned. The ranch was in serious financial trouble. Jack was battling demons from his military past. Everything was more precarious than she'd realized. And yet, strangely, she felt more committed to Carson's Creek than ever. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just a passive recipient of others' decisions. She was part of something invested in its success or failure. Settling into bed, Abby pulled out her notebook and began to write, Dear Little Star, tonight, I learned that Carson's Creek is in financial trouble. A man named Townsend wants to buy it for some fancy resort, and the bank might foreclose if Jack can't make the mortgage payment by the end of August, right when you're due to arrive. I should be terrified. I should be planning my escape route, figuring out where we'll go if everything falls apart. That's what the old Abby would have done. But something has changed in me these past months. For the first time, I don't want to run. I want to stay and fight for this place that's becoming home. I want to help Jack the way he's helping us. I don't know how yet, but I promise you this, little star, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure Carson's Creek is still here when you arrive. You deserve to know what it feels like to belong somewhere from the very beginning. Love, Mom. Martha found the notebook the next morning. Abby had left it on the kitchen table when she went to feed the chickens, momentarily distracted by a call from Jack about a calf in distress. By the time she returned to the house, Martha was sitting at the table, the open notebook before her, her face unreadable. I'm sorry, Martha said, not sounding particularly apologetic. I thought it might be a grocery list or something similar. I didn't realize it was private until I'd already read too much. Abby felt a surge of violation, quickly followed by embarrassment. Her letters to Little Star were deeply personal, never meant for anyone else's eyes. Those are private, she said, her voice tight with suppressed anger. They're for my baby. They're beautiful, Martha replied, surprising Abby. Your child will treasure them someday. The unexpected praise took the wind out of Abby's sails. You're not upset about what I wrote about the ranch's problems. Martha sighed, closing the notebook carefully. I've worked for the Carsons for 20 years, Abby. I know when the ranch is struggling. The question is, what do you plan to do with this information? I want to help, Abby said without hesitation. I just don't know how. Martha studied her for a long moment, as if seeing her properly for the first time. You really care about this place, don't you? About Jack? I do. The admission felt significant, like crossing a threshold she couldn't return from. Carson's Creek is the first place that's felt like it could be home. And Jack... Abby hesitated, trying to articulate the complicated feelings she had for the man who had taken her in. Jack sees me, not just the pregnant teenager or the foster kid with issues. Me. Something softened in Martha's stern face. He has that gift, she agreed, being people for who they are, not what life has done to them. Did he see that in you too? Abby asked, emboldened by this moment of connection. Martha's eyes darkened with old pain. He did. After Caroline died, I was lost. Angry at the world, at God, at myself for letting her take the car that night. Jack's father gave me a job when no one else would touch me. Said my grief didn't scare him. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. And when Jack came back from Afghanistan, broken in ways that reminded me of myself, we recognized something in each other. Two people trying to live with holes in their hearts. The candid admission stunned Abby. In the weeks she'd been at Carson's Creek, she'd never heard Martha speak so openly about her past or her feelings. I want to help save the ranch, Abby said again, more firmly this time. For all of us. Martha considered this, then nodded as if coming to a decision. The greenhouse, she said. Those herbs and vegetables you have been growing. They're good quality, better than what you can get at the supermarket in town. You think we could sell them? Abby asked, catching Martha's drift. There's a farmer's market in Laramie every Saturday. Small but popular with the summer tourists and the university crowd. People will pay premium prices for organic, locally grown produce. Martha tapped her fingers on the table, thinking, it won't solve all the ranch's problems, but it might help with the immediate cash flow issues. Excitement bubbled in Abby's chest. I could have a first harvest ready by next weekend if I focus on the herbs and greens that are already close. I have contacts at some of the better restaurants in Laramie, Martha continued, warming to the idea. Chefs who would pay for fresh specialty items they can't get from their regular suppliers. For the first time, Abby felt a glimmer of genuine hope. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a start, a way to contribute to be more than just a responsibility Jack had taken on. Thank you, she said impulsively, reaching across the table to squeeze Martha's hand. For not being angry about the notebook. For wanting to help. Martha didn't pull away from the contact, though Abby could sense her discomfort with the physical display of emotion. This ranch saved me once, she said simply. I'd like to return the favor. As Martha rose to begin preparing lunch, Abby realized something had shifted between them. The stern housekeeper had revealed a glimpse of the wounded heart beneath her practical exterior, and in doing so had opened the door to a different kind of relationship, one based on mutual understanding rather than mere tolerance. It was a small victory, but in a life that had seen far too many defeats, Abby would take it. The farmer's market idea proved more successful than any of them had anticipated. Abby's organic herbs and heirloom vegetables, presented under the Carson's Creek Organics banner Martha had hastily painted, sold out within 2 hours at the first market. People are willing to pay 3 times the supermarket price for fresh basil and heirloom tomatoes, Abby reported excitedly as Jack drove them back to the ranch that Saturday afternoon. And Martha's restaurant contacts placed standing orders for weekly deliveries. Jack smiled, the expression becoming more natural on his face with each passing day. Sounds like you've found your calling. I wouldn't go that far, Abby demurred, though secretly pleased by his praise. But it feels good to contribute something. You contribute more than you know, Jack said quietly. The ranch feels different since you arrived. Better. When the simple statement, delivered without fanfare, warmed Abby more than any elaborate compliment could have. Jack wasn't a man who offered praise lightly or engaged in empty flattery. If he said she was making a difference, he meant it. As July progressed, Abby's small business venture grew. With Jack's help, she expanded the greenhouse operation, adding more beds and installing an irrigation system that made watering more efficient. Martha, revealing an unexpected talent for marketing, created attractive packaging and labels for their products. The additional income wasn't enough to solve all of Carson's Creek's financial problems, but it helped cover immediate expenses and bought them time to explore other options. Abby's pregnancy advanced into its 8th month, her body becoming increasingly unwieldy. Despite the physical discomfort, she found herself happier than she'd been in years. For the first time, she was part of something larger than herself, a household, a business, a community of sorts. She continued to write letters to Little Star, chronicling the developments at the ranch and her growing attachment to both Jack and Martha. The letters became less about fear and uncertainty, more about hope and possibilities. But as her due date approached, a new anxiety began to gnaw at her. What would happen after the baby was born? Would Jack still want them around once the reality of a newborn with all its noise, mess, and demands became apparent? Would she be able to keep up her contributions to the ranch while caring for an infant? The questions circled in her mind, especially at night, when the vastness of Wyoming's star-filled sky seemed to mirror the unknown expanse of her future. One evening in late July, Abby was sitting on the porch swing watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink when Jack joined her. He carried 2 glasses of lemonade, handing one to her before settling on the swing beside her. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the creak of the swing's chains and the distant lowing of cattle being moved to their night pasture. "Penny for your thoughts," Jack finally said. Abby hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I was wondering what happens after the baby comes. With us, with the ranch, with everything." Jack took a sip of his lemonade, considering. "What would you like to happen?" "I'd like to stay," Abby admitted. "I'd like little Star to grow up here, to know what it means to have roots somewhere. But I know a newborn changes everything, and with the ranch's financial situation—" "Abby," Jack interrupted gently, "I didn't invite you to Carson's Creek as a temporary guest. When I applied for guardianship, I was making a commitment to you and to your child. That hasn't changed. If anything, these past months have only reinforced my belief that you belong here." Relief washed over Abby, so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Even with all the problems, the money issues, Townsend's pressure to sell the drought. "Problems come and go," Jack said simply. "Family, Wassel, is forever. And like it or not, you've become family to me, Abby Jenkins. You and that little one you're carrying." Family. The word resonated in Abby's heart like a bell. For so long, she'd been without one, a solitary planet orbiting no particular sun. The idea that she might have found her place, her people, was almost too much to hope for. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to find words adequate to express what his assurance meant to her. Jack, never comfortable with emotional moments, simply nodded. But as the swing continued its gentle motion, he did something unexpected. He began to hum softly an old country lullaby that seemed to rise from some long-buried memory. Abby closed her eyes, letting the simple melody wash over her. In that moment, with the day's last light gilding the mountains and Jack's quiet humming surrounding her like a blanket, she allowed herself to believe that everything might actually work out. It was a dangerous feeling for someone who had learned early and hard that hope was often just a prelude to disappointment. But sitting on that porch swing, cradled in the peace of a Wyoming evening, Abby chose to embrace it anyway. Some risks she was beginning to believe were worth taking. August arrived with a heat wave that seemed to suck the moisture from the very air. The drought that had plagued the region for 3 years intensified, turning pastures brown and creek beds to dust. Jack spent long days moving cattle to what little green grazing remained, his face growing more lined with worry as the weeks passed. Abby, now in her 9th month of pregnancy, continued to tend her greenhouse operation with Martha's help. The controlled environment protected her plants from the worst of the heat, but required constant attention to maintain optimal growing conditions. On the 2nd Saturday of the month, as Abby and Martha were preparing for the farmer's market, a commotion outside drew their attention. A sleek red sports car had pulled up beside Jack's dusty pickup, its engine still purring like a contented cat. "Who on earth?" Martha muttered, setting down the basket of herbs she'd been gathering. A young man emerged from the car, tall, tan, dressed in expensive casual clothes that nonetheless looked out of place on a working ranch. He stood for a moment surveying the property with the confident air of someone accustomed to being welcomed wherever he went. "Stay here," Martha instructed Abby, her voice tight with sudden tension. "I'll handle this." But before Martha could reach the door, the young man had bounded up the porch steps and knocked with the casual entitlement of someone who expected immediate attention. Martha opened the door, her body language deliberately blocking the entrance. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Abigail Jenkins," the young man said, his voice carrying easily to where Abby stood frozen in the kitchen. "I was told she's staying here." Abby felt the blood drain from her face. She knew that voice, had heard it in her nightmares for months. Tyler Henderson, the father of her baby. Martha's response was cool and measured. "And who might you be, Tyler Henderson?" He flashed what he clearly thought was a charming smile. "I'm an old friend of Abby's. Is she around?" Before Martha could answer, Abby moved to the door, one hand protectively covering her prominent belly. She needed to face him on her own terms. "Hello, Tyler," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. What are you doing here? Tyler's eyes widened as they took in her condition. Wow, Abby, you're really pregnant. That tends to happen in the ninth month, Abby replied dryly. You didn't answer my question. What are you doing at Carson's Creek? Tyler had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I saw the article in the Laramie Gazette about the new organic produce business at Carson's Creek Ranch. There was a photo of you at the farmer's market. I thought we should talk. We have nothing to talk about. Abby's tone was final. Actually, we do. Tyler's confident facade faltered slightly. Can we speak privately? It's important. Martha interjected. Anything you have to say to Abby can be said in front of me. Tyler looked between them, clearly calculating his options. Fine, my father saw the article too. He recognized you, Abby. He knows about the baby. A cold knot of fear formed in Abby's stomach. Frank Henderson was a state senator with aspirations for higher office, a man known for his family values platform and his ability to make problems disappear. And, she prompted, struggling to keep her voice even, and he thinks we should discuss arrangements. Tyler shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. For after the baby is born. Arrangements, Abby repeated flatly. You mean now that I'm about to have your baby, the one you denied was yours when I told your parents what happened, now you want to discuss arrangements? Tyler had the decency to look ashamed. Look, I know I handled things badly before. I was scared. My dad was running for re-election, and a scandal would have ruined his career, Abby finished for him. So instead, you let me be branded a liar and a troublemaker. You let me get thrown out of your house with nowhere to go. I'm sorry, Tyler said, and for a moment he almost sounded sincere. I really am, but things are different now. My father thinks, I don't care what your father thinks. Abby interrupted, anger giving her strength. This is my baby, mine. You lost any right to be involved when you called me a manipulative slut in front of your parents and their social worker. Tyler's expression hardened. It's not that simple, Abby. My father has connections, resources. He can make things very difficult for you if he chooses. The threat hung in the air between them, all the more menacing for its vagueness. Martha stepped forward, her tall frame imposing despite her age. I think you should leave, Mr. Henderson, now. This isn't over, Tyler said, his confident mask slipping to reveal something uglier beneath. My father knows people at DCS. He knows Judge Barrett, who handles family court cases. One phone call, and your cozy situation here could get very complicated. Before either woman could respond, the sound of an approaching truck interrupted the confrontation. Jack's pickup appeared in a cloud of dust, skidding to a stop beside Tyler's sports car. Jack emerged from the truck, his expression darkening as he took in the scene on the porch. Everything all right here? He asked, climbing the steps with deliberate slowness. Jack, this is Tyler Henderson, Abby said, her voice tight. He's the baby's father. Understanding flashed in Jack's eyes, understanding and a cold anger that made Tyler take an involuntary step back. Mr. Henderson was just leaving, Martha said firmly. Tyler glanced between the three of them, clearly reassessing his position. Like I said, this isn't over. My father will be in touch. With that parting shot, he descended the porch steps and returned to his car. The engine roared to life and he sped down the driveway in a deliberate display of power and impatience. As the dust settled, Abby felt her knees give way. Jack was at her side, instantly supporting her weight with a strong arm around her shoulders. Let's get you inside, he said, gently guiding her to the kitchen table. Martha followed with a glass of water, her face grim. That boy is trouble, she said flatly, and if his father is anything like him. Frank Henderson, Jack said, recognition dawning, the state senator. Abby nodded miserably. Tyler's his only son, his pride and joy. Jack and Martha exchanged a look weighted with concern. How did he find you? Jack asked. There was an article about Carson's Creek Organics in the Laramie Gazette last week, Abby explained. They included a photo from the farmer's market. Tyler saw it, and now he suddenly wants to be involved with the baby. Jack's voice was skeptical. Not him, his father. Abby took a shaky sip of water. Tyler said Senator Henderson wants to discuss arrangements. He also implied that his father could cause problems for us through his connections at DCS and the family court. Jack's expression hardened. Is that so? What should we do? Abby asked, hating the tremor in her voice. First, you're going to rest, Jack said firmly. This kind of stress isn't good for you or the baby. Martha and I will handle the farmer's market today. But no arguments, Martha interjected. Jack's right. You need to rest. And after that, Jack continued, we're going to talk to a lawyer. If the Hendersons think they can threaten their way into our lives, they're in for a surprise. The quiet confidence in his voice steadied Abby somewhat, but the fear remained. She'd seen firsthand the kind of influence wealthy, connected families like the Hendersons wielded. They could make life very difficult for someone like her, a foster kid with a history of behavioral problems and no resources of her own. As if reading her thoughts, Jack placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're not facing this alone, Abby. Carson's Creek takes care of its own. The simple declaration delivered without fanfare or drama wrapped around Abby's heart like a protective shield. For so long, she'd been alone in her struggles, a solitary figure against a hostile world. The idea that she now had people willing to stand beside her, to fight for her, was almost too much to process. Later that evening, after Jack and Martha had returned from the farmer's market, the three of them sat around the kitchen table developing a plan. Jack had already called a lawyer friend in Cheyenne who specialized in family law, and they had an appointment for Monday morning. The most important thing, Jack emphasized, is documenting everything. Every interaction with Tyler or his father, every threat, every promise, all of it gets written down with dates and times, and Abby nodded grateful for his practical approach. What if they try to take the baby legally, I mean? Jack's expression was grim but determined. They'd have to prove you're an unfit mother, which you're not, or that the baby would be better off with them, which it wouldn't. But the Hendersons have money and connections, Abby persisted. And I'm nobody. You are not nobody, Martha said sharply. You are Abigail Jenkins, a smart, capable young woman who has overcome more obstacles in 17 years than most people face in a lifetime. And you are part of this family now. The word family hung in the air like a promise. Martha's right, Jack agreed, and family protects its own. We're going to fight this, Abby, together. As they continued to discuss strategies and possibilities, Abby felt something shift inside her, a strengthening of resolve, a deepening of commitment. The Hendersons might have money and power, but she had something they couldn't buy or intimidate, a home where she was valued for who she was, not what she could provide or represent. For the first time in her life, Abby wasn't facing a crisis alone, and that she was beginning to believe might make all the difference. The meeting with the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Reeves, was both reassuring and sobering. She listened to their story without interruption, taking detailed notes and occasionally asking for clarification. The good news, Ms. Reeves said when they had finished, is that Tyler Henderson has essentially abandoned any claim to paternity up to this point. He denied being the father, took no steps to support Abby during her pregnancy, and has shown no interest in the child until now, when it's politically convenient for his family. And the bad news, Jack prompted. The bad news is that Frank Henderson does indeed have significant influence in this state. If he decides to support his son's claim to paternity and push for custody or visitation rights, he has the resources to make it a lengthy and expensive legal battle. Abby's heart sank. So they could take my baby. Not easily, no, Ms. Reeves assured her. The courts generally favor the mother, especially in cases where the father has been absent. But they could make things complicated. They could petition for paternity testing, supervised visitation, even partial custody eventually. What's our best strategy? Jack asked, his voice calm, despite the concern evident in his eyes. Ms. Reeves considered this. Documentation, as you've already mentioned. Every interaction, every threat, every promise, all of it gets recorded. I'd also recommend collecting evidence of Tyler's initial denial of paternity if possible. Statements from social workers, foster parents, anyone who witnessed his reaction when Abby first told him about the pregnancy. Mrs. Henderson was there when I told them, Abby recalled. She called me a liar and said I was trying to trap their son. That's helpful, Ms. Reeves nodded. Also, anything that demonstrates your commitment to parenting, prenatal care records, preparations for the baby, your efforts to create a stable home environment at Carson's Creek. Jack had been quiet, processing the information. What about the guardianship arrangement? He asked finally. I'm Abby's legal guardian until she turns 18 next year. Does that give us any additional protection? It does, Miss Reeves confirmed. As Abby's guardian, you have certain rights and responsibilities that would make it harder for the Hendersons to interfere. And once the baby is born, if you were to legally adopt Abby, that would create an even stronger family unit in the eyes of the court. Adopt me, Abby repeated, stunned by the suggestion. Jack looked equally surprised. Is that possible? Abby's almost 18? It's unusual but not unprecedented, Ms. Reeves explained. Adoption of older teens happens more often than people realize, especially in cases where there's already a strong bond and no competing family claims. And it would strengthen your position significantly if the Hendersons do decide to pursue custody. The idea of being legally permanently connected to Jack, of having a real father after so many years without one, was overwhelming. Abby felt tears spring to her eyes, hormones and emotion combining to break through her usual composure. We'll discuss it, Jack said, placing a steadying hand on Abby's shoulder. For now, let's focus on preparing for the immediate challenges. By the time they left Ms. Reeves's office, they had a clear action plan: gather documentation, prepare for the baby's arrival, and wait to see what move the Hendersons would make next. The drive back to Carson's Creek was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. As they turned onto the long gravel road leading to the ranch, Jack finally broke the silence. What do you think about what Miss Reeves suggested about the adoption? Abby stared out the window at the familiar landscape rolling by. Would you really want to do that? Legally adopt me? I wouldn't have suggested it if I hadn't. I wouldn't have suggested it if I wasn't serious. Jack said, his eyes still on the road ahead. But it's a big decision. For both of us. Abby felt a swell of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. Why would you want to adopt me? I'm nearly 18. I'll be a legal adult in a few months anyway. Jack was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully, as he always did. Family isn't about legal definitions, Abby. It's about belonging, about choosing each other deliberately and permanently. He glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. And I'd like you to know that you belong somewhere, that you have a permanent home regardless of what happens with the Hendersons or the ranch or anything else. The simple declaration, delivered without drama or expectation, broke something open inside Abby, a wall she hadn't even realized she'd built around her heart. For so long, she'd been careful not to want too much, not to hope too deeply, knowing that such feelings only made the inevitable disappointment more painful. But sitting in Jack's truck, watching the familiar landscape of Carson's Creek come into view, Abby allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to truly belong somewhere, to have a home that couldn't be taken away with a phone call or a caseworker's decision, to have a father who had chosen her knowing all her flaws and complications. I'd like that, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'd like that very much. Jack nodded, once the gesture containing more emotion than any effusive response could have. Then we'll talk to Ms. Reeves about starting the process after the baby comes. As they pulled up to the ranch house, Martha was waiting on the porch, her usually stern expression even more pronounced. We have company, she announced as they climbed out of the truck. A sleek black sedan was parked beside Martha's practical station wagon, the same vehicle Abby had seen Richard Townsend driving during his previous visit. Townsend's back, Jack's voice held a note of weary resignation. Not just Townsend, Martha replied grimly. He brought a friend, Senator Frank Henderson. Abby felt her blood run cold. Tyler's father was here on the ranch barely 24 hours after Tyler's threatening visit. This couldn't be a coincidence. Jack's expression hardened. Where are they? In the living room. I've been serving them coffee and making small talk for the past half hour. Martha's tone made it clear what she thought of the task. They said they wanted to speak with both of you. Jack turned to Abby, his eyes searching her face. You don't have to do this. I can tell them you're resting. But Abby straightened her shoulders, one hand instinctively resting on her swollen belly. No, I need to face them. I need to hear what they have to say. Jack nodded, respect evident in his gaze. All right, but remember what Ms. Reeves said, document everything. And don't agree to anything without consulting her first. Together they entered the house, Martha following close behind. The living room, a space rarely used except on special occasions, felt invaded by the presence of the two men who rose as they entered. Richard Townsend, impeccably dressed as always, offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Beside him stood a taller man with silver hair and a politician's practiced charm, Frank Henderson, unmistakably Tyler's father, with the same strong jawline and confident bearing. "Mr. Carson," Henderson said, extending his hand, "thank you for seeing us without an appointment. I'm Frank Henderson." Jack shook the offered hand briefly, his expression neutral. "Senator, this is a surprise." Henderson's gaze shifted to Abby, taking in her pregnant form with a calculating assessment that made her skin crawl. "And you must be Abigail. My son has told me about you." "Really?" Abby couldn't keep the edge from her voice. "That's interesting considering he spent months denying he knew me at all." A flicker of annoyance crossed Henderson's smooth features before his political mask slipped back into place. "Yes, well, Tyler has acknowledged that he handled the situation poorly. That's partly why we're here today. To make amends and discuss how we move forward in a way that benefits everyone. Perhaps we should all sit down," Townsend suggested smoothly, gesturing to the seating area. Jack nodded, taking a position beside Abby on the sofa, while Martha hovered near the doorway, clearly unwilling to leave them alone with the visitors. "Now," Henderson began once they were settled, "I understand my son visited yesterday and things got off to a rather rocky start. I want to apologize for that. Tyler is young and sometimes speaks without thinking through the implications of his words. He threatened to use your influence to interfere with my guardianship of Abby," Jack said bluntly. "I'd call that more than a rocky start." Henderson had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "Tyler overstepped, but his concern, our concern, is legitimate. That child Abigail is carrying is my grandchild. Surely you can understand why we'd want to be involved in its life. Funny how this concern only materialized after I was photographed for a newspaper article," Abby observed. "Not when I was telling everyone who would listen that your son was the father. Not when I was being called a liar and thrown out of my foster home. Not during any of the 8 months I've been pregnant." Henderson sighed as if dealing with a particularly stubborn constituent. "Politics is a complicated business, Abigail. There were considerations that needed to be weighed. But the important thing is that we're here now, ready to take responsibility." "What exactly does that mean?" Jack asked, his voice level, but with steel beneath. Henderson exchanged a glance with Townsend before continuing. "We'd like to propose an arrangement that would benefit everyone. The Henderson family would provide financial support for the child, the best education, health care, everything a child could need. In return, we would have regular visitation rights and involvement in major decisions regarding the child's upbringing." "And what about me?" Abby asked, her hands protectively cradling her belly. "Where do I fit into this arrangement?" "You would of course remain the child's mother," Henderson said, as if conferring a great favor. "We have no desire to separate you from your baby. In fact, we'd be prepared to offer you educational opportunities as well, college tuition perhaps, once the child is a bit older." The seemingly generous offer hung in the air, its unspoken conditions and implications hovering just beneath the surface. "That's very thoughtful," Jack said carefully, "but I'm curious about the timing of this sudden interest in Abby and her baby." Townsend leaned forward, his businessman's instincts sensing an opening for negotiation. "Jack, let's be frank. Carson's Creek is struggling financially. The drought-falling cattle prices, the mortgage payments, it's a perfect storm of economic pressures. Senator Henderson is offering a way to ensure both Abby and her child are provided for regardless of what happens to the ranch. The implication was clear. Take the deal or risk losing everything when the bank foreclosed." "And what's your interest in this, Townsend?" Jack asked, his gaze sharp. "You're not exactly known for your charitable impulses." A thin smile crossed Townsend's face. "Let's just say the senator and I have mutual interests. His family's legacy secured through his grandchild, my development project moving forward with the senator's support in overcoming certain regulatory hurdles. And Carson's Creek is what collateral damage in your grand plans." Jack's voice had taken on a dangerous edge. Henderson raised his hands in a placating gesture. "No one is suggesting anything of the sort. The ranch has been in your family for generations, Jack. We respect that history. But times change, markets shift. Perhaps it's time to consider whether holding on to the past is really in the best interests of Abby and her child." The room fell silent as the full weight of their proposal settled over them. They weren't just offering financial support for the baby, they were suggesting a complete realignment of everyone's future. Abby as a dependent of the Henderson family, the ranch sold to Townsend's development company, Jack. Where would Jack fit into this new arrangement? We need time to consider your offer, Jack said finally, his voice neutral. Of course, Henderson agreed smoothly. These are significant decisions. But I should mention that time is something of a factor. The baby is due soon, and establishing legal frameworks for support and visitation would ideally happen before the birth. And the bank's deadline for your mortgage payment is approaching, isn't it? Townsend added, his tone deceptively casual. End of the month, I believe. Jack's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. We'll be in touch within the week. Taking this as their cue to leave, Henderson and Townsend rose. One more thing, Henderson said, reaching into his jacket pocket. A small gift for the baby, a gesture of goodwill. He handed Abby a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a tiny charm, a stylized letter H. For Henderson, he explained with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Family tradition. Abby accepted the box with rigid politeness, fighting the urge to throw it back in his face. Thank you. After Martha had shown the visitors out, the three of them sat in stunned silence, processing what had just happened. They're working together, Jack said finally. Henderson wants access to the baby, and Townsend wants the ranch. They're using each other to get what they want. And using us as pawns in their game, Abby added bitterly. Martha, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, spoke up. The question is, what are we going to do about it? Jack ran a hand over his face, the gesture revealing his fatigue more clearly than words could have. First, we call Ms. Reeves and tell her about this visit. Then we start looking at our options, all of them, even the ones we don't like. You're not actually considering their offer, Abby asked, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Jack's gaze softened as he looked at her. No, Abby, I'm not considering giving up on you or the baby, but we need to be realistic about our situation. The bank deadline is real. Townsend was right about that. So we fight, Abby said firmly. We find another way. A ghost of a smile touched Jack's lips. That's my girl. The simple phrase, my girl, wrapped around Abby's heart like a warm blanket. Whatever happened next, whatever challenges they faced, she wasn't facing them alone. And that made all the difference. The next morning, Abby woke early, her back aching from the weight of her nearly full-term pregnancy. Sleep had been elusive, her mind racing with concerns about the Hendersons, the ranch's financial problems, and the rapidly approaching birth of her baby. Unable to find a comfortable position in bed, she decided to get up and start her day. The house was quiet, with Jack already out checking on the cattle, and Martha not due to arrive for another hour. Abby made her way to the kitchen, intending to prepare breakfast, but found herself drawn instead to the window overlooking the eastern pasture. The sun was just cresting the distant mountains, painting the landscape in shades of gold and amber. A few hundred yards from the house, she could see Spirit, the injured stallion, standing alone near the fence line. Something about the solitary figure called to her. On impulse, Abby slipped on her boots and a light jacket and made her way outside. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying the scents of sage and pine. Dew sparkled on the grass, soaking the hem of her maternity dress, as she walked carefully toward the fence where Spirit stood watching her approach. Unlike the other horses who would come readily to the fence for attention, Spirit maintained his distance, ears flicking nervously as Abby drew near. Good morning, she said softly, stopping a respectful distance from the fence. You're up early too, huh? The stallion snorted, pawing the ground with one hoof but not retreating. I know what it's like, Abby continued, keeping her voice gentle and conversational. To be in pain, to not trust anyone, to feel like you're better off alone because, at least then, no one can hurt you again. Spirit's ears swiveled toward her, his intelligent eyes fixed on her face. But I'm learning something here at Carson's Creek, Abby said, easing herself down to sit on a nearby stump, her hand absently rubbing her swollen belly. Sometimes the risk of being hurt again is worth taking if it means you don't have to be alone anymore. To her surprise, Spirit took a few cautious steps toward the fence, still maintaining a safe distance, but showing a curiosity he hadn't displayed before. Jack told me about your accident, Abby continued, how you got tangled in barbed wire and nearly lost your leg, how you haven't let anyone near you since, not even to check your wound properly. The stallion's right foreleg bore a long, jagged scar, the hair growing back white against his dappled gray coat. He favored it slightly when he moved, suggesting it still caused him discomfort. I think maybe we're kindred spirits, you and I, Abby said with a small smile at her own pun. Both of us carrying our scars, both of us afraid to trust. But both of us finding something here at Carson's Creek that might be worth the risk. As she spoke, Abby reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out an apple she'd grabbed from the kitchen. Spirit's nostrils flared at the scent, and he took another step closer to the fence. It's okay to be cautious, Abby said, placing the apple on the fence post nearest to her. But it's also okay to accept kindness when it's offered. No strings attached. She eased herself up from the stump, feeling the weight of her pregnancy as she straightened. I'll leave this here for you, your choice whether to take it or not. Just like it's my choice whether to trust Jack and Martha, whether to believe that this time things might be different. As Abby turned to walk back to the house, she heard a soft nickering behind her. Glancing back, she saw Spirit approaching the fence post, his movement slow and deliberate but purposeful. A smile spread across her face as the stallion carefully took the apple, his velvet lips delicately lifting it from the post. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one. Progress, however slight, was still progress. When she reached the porch, Abby was surprised to find Martha watching from the doorway, a basket of fresh eggs in her hands. I didn't hear you arrive, Abby said. Just got here. Martha replied, her gaze shifting to where Spirit was still standing near the fence. Jack's been trying to get that horse to trust him for months. No luck at all. He's scared, Abby said simply. He needs to learn that not everyone who comes near him is going to cause him pain. Martha's expression softened slightly, a rare occurrence. Some lessons are harder to learn than others, for horses and for people. The observation hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken understanding. Come inside, Martha said after a moment. I'll make breakfast. You look like you could use a cup of tea. In the kitchen, as Martha prepared a hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits, Abby found herself watching the older woman with new curiosity. Despite having lived under the same roof for months, Martha remained something of an enigma, efficient, capable, occasionally kind, but largely closed off. Can I ask you something? Abby ventured, as Martha placed a steaming cup of herbal tea before her. You can ask, Martha replied, her tone neutral. I may or may not answer. Fair enough. Abby wrapped her hands around the warm mug. You said you lost your daughter Caroline 20 years ago, but you never mentioned her father. Is he dead? No. Martha's expression remained carefully controlled as she turned back to the stove. Just gone. Left when Caroline was 5. Said he wasn't cut out for family life. I'm sorry, Abby said softly. Martha shrugged, the gesture dismissive but with an underlying tension that suggested old pain. It was a long time ago. Caroline and I managed just fine without him. And after Caroline died, Abby asked, treading carefully, you came to work for Jack's father. I needed something to do with myself, Martha said, her voice matter-of-fact. Sitting at home with Caroline's things, her memories, it was killing me. Thomas Carson, Jack's father, offered me a job when no one else would, said my grief didn't scare him. The phrase struck Abby as familiar. Jack said something similar about you, that when he came back from Afghanistan, you recognized something in each other. Two people trying to live with holes in their hearts. Martha looked genuinely surprised. Jack said that. Abby nodded. Well, Martha seemed at a loss for words, an unusual state for the normally composed housekeeper. Jack doesn't talk much about that time. When he first came back from his last deployment, he was different, distant, angry, drinking too much. PTSD, Abby said, among other things. Martha's expression darkened with memory. He'd seen too much over there, done things that haunted him, and then his father got sick, and suddenly he was responsible for a struggling ranch he hadn't set foot on in 15 years. Martha placed a plate of food in front of Abby, then surprised her by sitting down across from her instead of continuing to bustle around the kitchen. I thought he was going to sell the place, Martha admitted. Those first few months, he'd disappear for days at a time, come back smelling like a distillery. His father was dying upstairs, and Jack was falling apart downstairs. It was, she shook her head, it was a dark time. What changed? Abby asked, fascinated by this glimpse into Jack's past. Thomas died. Jack sobered up enough for the funeral, and something happened during the service. I don't know exactly what a realization maybe or a memory, but afterward he poured every bottle of liquor in the house down the drain. checked himself into a VA treatment program the next day. Martha's voice held a note of respect that Abby rarely heard. When he came back 6 weeks later, he was different. Still struggling, still haunted, but determined to make the ranch work, to honor his father's legacy. The image of Jack stoic, capable Jack in such a vulnerable state was difficult for Abby to reconcile with the man she knew. But it also deepened her understanding of him, of why he might have seen something in her worth saving. "Thank you," Abby said quietly, "for telling me." Martha nodded once her usual reserve slipping back into place. "Jack's a good man, better than he gives himself credit for. But he's carrying the weight of this ranch, his family's history, and his own demons all at once. It's a heavy load. And now he's carrying us too," Abby said, guilt coloring her voice. "Me and the baby, all our complications." "Don't mistake a burden for a blessing," Martha said sharply. "Having you here has changed him, given him something beyond the ranch to focus on, to care about. I haven't seen him this present since before he enlisted." The door opened then, cutting off their conversation as Jack himself entered, bringing with him the sense of morning air and honest work. "You're up early," he observed, nodding to Abby as he removed his hat and hung it on the hook by the door. "How are you feeling?" "Too big," Abby replied, sad with a small smile. "And tired. But okay." Jack's gaze was assessing as he studied her face. "You should rest today. Doctor said the baby could come any time now." "I have orders to fill for the farmer's market," Abby protested mildly, "and I wanted to check on the new seedlings in the greenhouse." "I can handle the orders," Martha interjected, "and the seedlings can wait a day." Jack poured himself a cup of coffee, his movements efficient and practiced. "I saw Spirit by the fence when I was coming in. Closest he's been to the house in months." "Abby was talking to him earlier," Martha informed him. "Seems he's decided she might be worth trusting." A smile tugged at the corner of Jack's mouth. "Smart horse." The simple praise warmed Abby more than she cared to admit. Coming from Jack, who dispensed compliments with careful selectivity, it felt significant. As they ate breakfast together, discussing the day's tasks and the upcoming farmer's market, Abby was struck by how natural it felt, this domestic scene, this sense of belonging to a household, a family. For most of her life, meals had been solitary or uncomfortable affairs in foster homes where she felt like an intruder. Here she was, part of the rhythm of the ranch, her presence expected and welcomed. After breakfast, despite her protests, Abby found herself guided to the living room couch with a stack of books, a glass of water, and strict instructions to rest. "I'm pregnant, not sick," she grumbled, those without much heat. "Humor us," Jack said, his tone gentle but firm. "You've been pushing yourself hard these past weeks. Take a day to just be." Reluctantly, Abby settled onto the couch, arranging pillows to support her aching back. She had to admit, if only to herself, that she was exhausted. The emotional strain of the Hendersons' visit, coupled with the physical demands of late pregnancy, had drained her reserves. As Jack headed back outside and Martha bustled in the kitchen, Abby reached for her notebook, determined to use the enforced rest productively. She had letters to write to Little Star, important ones, given the uncertainty of their situation. "Dear Little Star, things are getting complicated as we get closer to meeting each other. Yesterday, your biological father showed up at the ranch. Tyler Henderson, a name I hope never to write again. He implied that his father, as Senator Frank Henderson, might try to use his influence to gain some kind of access to you after you're born. Then today, the senator himself arrived along with a man named Richard Townsend, who wants to buy Carson's Creek for some fancy resort development. They offered financial support for both of us in exchange for allowing the Hendersons to be part of your life. It sounds generous on the surface, but I don't trust their motives. I need you to know something important, Little Star. No matter what happens, no matter what choices I make in the coming days and weeks, they will always, always be made with your well-being as my priority. You are the most important person in my life, and nothing, not money, not security, not even my own happiness will ever come before what's best for you. I've been thinking a lot about what kind of mother I want to be. I never had a good example. My own mother loved me, I think, but she was sick for most of my life and gone by the time I was 11. After that, there were foster mothers of varying degrees of indifference or cruelty. But here at Carson's Creek, I've seen something different. I've seen how Jack cares for this land, these animals, even for Martha and me, not with grand gestures or emotional declarations, but with consistent, reliable presence. with actions that say, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, more clearly than words ever could. That's the kind of parent I want to be for you. Someone whose love is a given, not a reward to be earned or a weapon to be wielded. Someone who sees you fully and loves you completely, complications and all. Jack has offered to legally adopt me even though I'll be 18 in a few months. He wants me to know I have a permanent home regardless of what happens with the ranch or the Hendersons or anything else. It's the most generous thing anyone has ever offered me, not just a place to stay, but a place to belong. I wonder sometimes if I deserve all this, if I've done anything to earn such kindness. But maybe that's the point. Real love isn't earned. It's given freely without conditions or expectations. I promise to love you that way, little star. Without conditions, without expectations, without end. All my love, Mom. As Abby finished writing, she became aware of a presence nearby. Looking up, she saw Martha standing in the doorway, a basket of freshly folded laundry in her arms. I didn't mean to disturb you, Martha said, nodding toward the notebook, writing to the baby again. Abby nodded, closing the notebook self-consciously. It helps me sort through my thoughts, and someday when little Star is older, I want them to know what this time was like, how much they were loved even before they were born. Martha's expression softened. That's a precious gift you're creating, memories preserved in your own words. There was a wistfulness in her tone that caught Abby's attention. Did you keep anything like that for Caroline? A photo album, Martha said after a moment's hesitation. Pictures from every birthday, every Christmas, every first day of school. I still have it packed away in a box at my cottage. The revelation surprised Abby. She'd never thought about where Martha lived when she wasn't at the main house. You have a cottage on the ranch, Martha nodded. Small place about a quarter-mile down the west road. Thomas Carson built it for the previous housekeeper back in the 70s. It suits my needs. Abby considered this new information. I'd like to see your photo album sometime, if you wouldn't mind sharing it. Martha looked startled by the request, then thoughtful. Perhaps, someday. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a refusal either. From Martha, it was practically an invitation. The rest of the day passed in quiet domesticity. Abby alternated between reading, napping, and writing in her notebook. Jack came in for lunch, bringing news of a potential buyer for 3 of their yearling bulls, a small financial relief, but welcome nonetheless. By late afternoon, Abby was restless despite her fatigue. The enforced inactivity, while necessary, chafed against her independent nature. When Jack and Martha were both occupied with other tasks, she slipped outside to the greenhouse, telling herself she would just check on the seedlings quickly and then return to the house. The greenhouse was her sanctuary, a place of growth and possibility. Over the past months, she had transformed it from a neglected shell into a productive space bursting with life. Rows of herbs, vegetables, and edible flowers thrived under her care, their vibrant greens a testament to her nurturing touch. Abby moved slowly through the narrow aisles, checking soil moisture and removing yellowing leaves with practiced efficiency. The repetitive tasks soothed her, allowing her mind to drift away from worries about the Hendersons and the ranch's financial troubles. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the first drops of rain pattering against the glass roof. By the time she became aware of the weather, a full-fledged summer thunderstorm was underway, sheets of rain obscuring the view of the main house. Abby weighed her options. The greenhouse was sturdy enough to wait out the storm, but Jack and Martha would worry if they discovered she was missing. Her cell phone was back in the house, so she couldn't call to let them know she was safe. Deciding to make a dash for it, Abby gathered her gardening tools and headed for the door. As she stepped outside, the full force of the storm hit her, driving rain, gusting wind, and the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the darkened landscape. She had made it halfway to the house when a contraction seized her sharp and sudden enough to make her gasp. Abby froze, one hand braced against a fence post, the other clutching her belly. It's just a Braxton Hicks, she told herself as the pain receded. False labor. I've had them before. But as she straightened and took another step, a second contraction gripped her stronger than the first. And with it came a rush of warm fluid down her legs that had nothing to do with the rain. Her water had broken. For a moment, Abby stood paralyzed with shock and fear. She was in labor in the middle of a thunderstorm hundreds of yards from the house. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she forced it down with sheer willpower. One step at a time, she thought, echoing advice Jack had given her about breaking down overwhelming tasks. Just focus on the next step. Gritting her teeth, Abby began to move toward the house again slower now, one hand supporting her belly. Another contraction hit before she'd gone 20 feet, forcing her to stop and breathe through the pain. Abby, the voice barely audible over the storm, sent a wave of relief through her. Jack was running toward her, concern etched on his face. My water broke, she called as he reached her. The baby's coming. Jack's expression shifted from concern to focused determination. Without hesitation, he scooped Abby into his arms, cradling her against his chest as if she weighed nothing. Hold on, he said, already moving toward the house with long, steady strides. I've got you. Abby wrapped her arms around his neck, grateful for his strength, as another contraction rippled through her. By the time they reached the house, she was breathing in short, sharp gasps, the pain intensifying with an alarming speed. Martha met them at the door, her usual composure giving way to efficient action as she took in the situation. Upstairs, she directed, already moving ahead of them to prepare Abby's room. I'll call Dr. Mitchell. Jack carried Abby up the stairs and gently laid her on her bed. I'll get dry clothes, he said, moving toward the dresser. No time. Abby gasped as another contraction seized her. They're coming too fast. Martha returned, her expression grave. The storm has knocked out the phone lines and my cell has no signal. The CB radio in my truck, Jack suggested. I can try to reach the ranger station. They might be able to get a message to the hospital. Go, Martha urged. I'll stay with her. As Jack hurried out, Martha turned to Abby with a calmness that belied the urgency of the situation. Let's get you into dry clothes, honey. Then I need to check how far along you are. Abby nodded, allowing Martha to help her change into a nightgown. The contractions were coming regularly now, each one more intense than the last. Have you ever done this before? Abby asked between pains, fear making her voice higher than usual. Delivered a baby. Martha's hands were steady as she arranged pillows to support Abby's back. Once, a long time ago, a neighbor's child during a blizzard when the ambulance couldn't get through. Her eyes met Abby's with unflinching honesty. But Jack has more medical training than I do, and he's delivered calves and foals. The comparison should have been absurd, Abby as just another animal giving birth on the ranch. But there was something reassuring about Martha's practical approach, her refusal to panic or sugarcoat the situation. I need to check your progress, Martha said, her tone gentle but firm. May I? Abby nodded, gritting her teeth as another contraction washed over her. Martha's examination was quick and professional. You're already at 7 centimeters, she reported. This baby is coming fast, Abby. First babies usually take their time, but yours seems to be in a hurry. Jack returned, then his clothes soaked from his dash to and from the truck. Radio's down too, he reported grimly. Storm must have knocked out power to the repeater station on the mountain. The implications hung in the air between them. There would be no hospital, no doctor, no medical assistance beyond what they could provide themselves. We can do this, Jack, said, his voice steady despite the concern in his eyes. I've got medical training and Martha's delivered a baby before. And you, Abby, he took her hand in his. You're the strongest person I know. The simple vote of confidence delivered without drama or exaggeration steadied Abby in a way that more elaborate reassurances couldn't have. Jack believed in her, and that made her believe in herself. What do we need? She asked, forcing herself to focus past the pain. Clean towels, hot water, scissors, string, Martha listed, already moving toward the door. I'll gather everything. And pain management, Jack added, his medical training asserting itself. We don't have proper medication, but there are techniques that can help. For the next hour, as the storm raged outside and Abby's labor intensified, Jack and Martha worked together with the synchronized efficiency of people who had faced crises side by side before. Jack coached Abby through breathing techniques he'd learned in his combat medic training, while Martha prepared the room with methodical thoroughness. When the time came to push, Abby found strength she didn't know she possessed. The pain was beyond anything she had imagined, a force of nature that consumed her entire being. But through it all, she held on to Jack's hand, drawing courage from his steady presence and calm voice. You're doing great, Abby, he encouraged as she bore down with another contraction. I can see the head. One more big push. Gathering the last reserves of her strength, Abby pushed with everything she had. There was a moment of searing pressure, then a sudden relief as the baby slipped into Jack's waiting hands. It's a girl, he announced, his voice thick with emotion. A beautiful baby girl. The infant's indignant wail filled the room, strong and healthy and perfect. Martha immediately wrapped the newborn in a clean towel, her experienced hands checking fingers, toes, color, and reflexes with practiced efficiency. "She's perfect," Martha confirmed, placing the swaddled infant on Abby's chest. 10 fingers, 10 toes, good strong lungs. Abby stared down at the tiny face, awestruck by the miracle in her arms. After months of writing letters to Little Star, of imagining this moment, reality was both more overwhelming and more beautiful than she could have anticipated. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mom." The baby quieted at the sound of her voice, dark eyes seeming to focus on Abby's face with startling intensity. "She knows you," Jack said softly, still holding Abby's hand. "She's been listening to your voice all these months." Martha busied herself with the practical aftermath of birth, her movements efficient but gentle. "You did wonderfully, Abby," she said, her usual reserve softened by the moment. "Like you were born to it." As the storm began to subside outside, a different kind of peace settled over the room, the quiet wonder of new life, of challenges overcome, of three unlikely people bound together by an experience none of them would ever forget. "Have you thought about names?" Jack asked as he helped Abby position the baby for her first feeding. Abby nodded, watching in amazement as her daughter latched on with determined concentration. "Hope," she said softly. "Her name is Hope Carson." The surname choice wasn't lost on Jack. His eyes, usually so controlled, shimmered with emotion. "Hope Carson," he repeated, his voice rough. "It fits her." "Is that all right?" Abby asked, suddenly uncertain. "Using your name, I mean. Legally, she'd be Hope Jenkins until the adoption goes through, but—" "It's more than all right," Jack assured her, his hand gently stroking the baby's downy head. "It's perfect." Martha, who had been watching the exchange with uncharacteristic softness in her expression, cleared her throat. "I'll go downstairs and make some tea. You two should have some time alone with Hope." After she left, Jack settled into the chair beside Abby's bed, his presence a comfort in the quiet room. "Thank you," Abby said, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything, for taking me in when no one else would, for being here for Hope's birth, for seeing something in me worth saving." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the tiny infant in Abby's arms. "When I was in Afghanistan," he finally said, his voice low and measured, "I saw too much death, too much loss. Coming back here to the ranch, I thought I was done with caring that deeply about anything or anyone. It was easier to just exist, to go through the motions." He reached out his weathered finger, gently touching Hope's tiny hand. The baby instinctively grasped it, her entire fist not even encircling his fingertip. "Then you arrived," Jack continued, "pregnant and alone and braver than anyone I'd ever met. And something woke up inside me. Something I thought had died over there in the desert." Abby felt tears streaming down her face but made no move to wipe them away. This was Jack, as she'd never seen him before, open, vulnerable, the carefully maintained walls around his emotions momentarily lowered. "You saved me, Abby," he said simply. "You and Hope. You gave me a reason to do more than just exist, a reason to live again." On the admission, delivered without drama or expectation, was the most profound gift anyone had ever given her. Not just acceptance, not just support, but the acknowledgement that her presence in his life had meaning, had value beyond the practical help she provided on the ranch. "We saved each other," Abby whispered, her voice breaking, "and now we'll save Hope too. Together." Jack nodded, emotion making speech difficult. Instead, he gently squeezed Hope's tiny hand still wrapped around his finger, a silent promise from a man who had never been comfortable with words, but whose actions spoke volumes. As the storm cleared completely and moonlight began to filter through the bedroom window, Abby felt a sense of peace unlike anything she'd experienced before. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the Hendersons, the ranch's financial troubles, the practical realities of caring for a newborn. But tonight, in this room with Jack beside her and Hope in her arms, everything felt possible. "We are family," she thought, the realization settling into her bones with the weight of truth. Not by blood, but by choice. And that makes it all the stronger. The news of Hope's birth spread quickly through the small community around Carson's Creek. By the time the roads were passable again, the next morning Dr. Mitchell had arrived to check on both mother and baby, pronouncing them healthy despite the unorthodox circumstances of the birth. "You did a fine job," he told Jack and Martha. Textbook delivery from what I can see. This little one is lucky to have had such competent hands bringing her into the world. The days that followed took on a dreamlike quality for Abby, the profound exhaustion of new motherhood, blending with moments of transcendent joy as she got to know her daughter. Hope was a good baby alert and interested in the world around her with a strong appetite and a surprisingly calm temperament. Jack and Martha adjusted to the presence of an infant in the house with unexpected ease. Martha revealed a hidden softness, singing old lullabies as she rocked Hope so Abby could shower or nap. And Jack, to everyone's surprise, had a natural gift for soothing the baby when she was fussy, his deep voice and steady heartbeat calming her when nothing else would. One afternoon, about a week after Hope's birth, Abby was sitting on the porch swing with her daughter, enjoying the fresh air and sunshine, when a familiar vehicle appeared on the long driveway leading to the ranch house. "Jack," she called through the open window. "Richard Townsend is here." Jack emerged from the house, his expression wary as he watched the black sedan approach. "Stay on the porch," he instructed Abby. "Let me handle this." Townsend parked beside Jack's truck and emerged from his vehicle with his usual polished confidence. But today he wasn't alone. Tyler Henderson stepped out of the passenger side looking uncomfortable in formal clothes that seemed at odds with the ranch setting. "Mr. Carson," Townsend greeted as he approached the porch. "Ms. Jenkins? And this must be the newest addition to Carson's Creek." His gaze lingered on Hope, who was sleeping peacefully in Abby's arms. "What can we do for you, Townsend?" Jack asked, his tone neutral, but with an undercurrent of tension. "We heard about the baby's arrival," Townsend replied smoothly. "Senator Henderson sends his congratulations. He would have come himself, but pressing business in the Capitol prevented it. So he sent his son instead." Abby observed her arms tightening protectively around Hope. Tyler shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "I wanted to come," he said, the words sounding rehearsed, to see my daughter." The claim hung in the air like smoke, acrid and unwelcome. "You denied she was yours for months," Abby reminded him, anger giving edge to her voice. "You called me a liar and a slut. You let your parents throw me out with nowhere to go." Tyler had the grace to look ashamed. "I know, and I'm sorry. I was scared and stupid and selfish." He glanced at Townsend, who gave him an encouraging nod. "But I want to make it right. I want to be part of her life." "That's not your decision to make," Jack said firmly. "Actually," Townsend interjected, his businessman's instincts, sensing an opening, "that's precisely what we've come to discuss. Senator Henderson has consulted with the family attorneys. As the biological father, Tyler has certain rights regarding the child." "Rights he forfeited when he abandoned Abby and denied paternity," Jack countered. "Courts might see it differently," Townsend said, with a shrug that managed to be both casual and threatening, "especially given the unconventional living arrangements here. A teenage mother living with an unrelated middle-aged man. It raises questions." The implication made Abby's blood boil. "Jack is my legal guardian," she said through gritted teeth. "He's been more of a father to me in 7 months than Tyler Henderson could be in a lifetime." "Nevertheless," Townsend continued, unruffled by her anger, "Senator Henderson is prepared to offer a generous settlement, financial support for both you and the child, educational opportunities, medical care, everything a young mother could need. In return, reasonable visitation rights for Tyler and the Henderson family." "And the ranch?" Jack asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. "Is that still part of the settlement?" A thin smile crossed Townsend's face. "The senator and I believe our mutual interest could be served by a comprehensive agreement. Your mortgage payment is due in less than a week, Jack. The bank is unlikely to extend further credit given the ranch's financial situation." "So this is blackmail," Abby said flatly. "Sell the ranch to Townsend, let the Hendersons play grandparents when it suits them, or they'll try to take Hope through the courts." "I wouldn't put it so crudely," Townsend demurred. "We're simply proposing a solution that benefits everyone." Tyler, who had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort, suddenly spoke up. Can I see her just for a minute?" The request, delivered with unexpected vulnerability, caught Abby off guard. For a brief moment, she saw past the entitled rich kid to the frightened teenager who had made a terrible mistake, a mistake not unlike her own in its way. "From there," she said after a moment's hesitation, indicating the bottom of the porch steps, "you can look but not touch, not yet, maybe not ever. That depends on you and on what happens next. Tyler nodded, moving slowly to the spot she had indicated. From there, he could see Hope's sleeping face, her tiny features relaxed in the innocent slumber of the very young. "She's beautiful," he said softly, genuine wonder in his voice. "What's her name?" "Hope," Abby replied. "Hope Carson." Tyler's eyes flickered to Jack, registering the significance of the surname choice, but he made no comment. Instead, he simply stood there, staring at his daughter with an expression Abby couldn't quite decipher. "We should be going," Townsend said after an uncomfortable silence. "Senator Henderson is expecting our report." He handed Jack a business card. "The senator's private number is on the back. He'd appreciate a call by tomorrow to discuss the terms of the agreement." Jack took the card without comment, his expression unreadable. As Townsend turned to leave, Tyler lingered for a moment longer, his gaze still fixed on Hope. "I really am sorry, Abby," he said quietly, "for everything. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am sorry." With that, he followed Townsend back to the car. Abby watched them drive away, a complex mixture of emotions churning inside her: anger, fear, and an unexpected flicker of something like pity for Tyler, caught in his father's political machinations, just as she had once been caught in the machinery of the foster care system. "Are you all right?" Jack asked as the car disappeared down the driveway. Abby looked down at Hope, still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the adult complications swirling around her small existence. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to pack a bag and run as far from the Hendersons as possible. Another part wants to stay and fight. And a small, stupid part of me wonders if maybe Tyler really does want to make amends." Jack considered this, his gaze thoughtful. "People can change," he said finally. "I've seen it happen. But real change takes time and consistent effort. It doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen because someone's father tells them it should." "So what do we do?" Abby asked, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. "The bank deadline is in 5 days. If we don't accept their offer, we could lose everything: the ranch, maybe even Hope if they follow through on their custody threats." Jack was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "We fight," he said finally, his voice steady with resolve. "We fight for what matters, for Hope, for you, for Carson's Creek, all of it." "How?" Abby asked, hope and desperation mingling in her voice. "I don't know yet," Jack admitted, "but we'll figure it out, together." As they sat on the porch, the afternoon sun bathing them in golden light, Abby allowed herself to believe him. They had already overcome so much: her pregnancy, the ranch's struggles, Hope's dramatic birth during the storm. Somehow they would find a way through this challenge too. They had to. Too much was at stake to consider any other outcome. The deadline loomed like a storm on the horizon. 4 days remained until the bank payment was due, and despite their determination to fight, Jack and Abby were running out of options. The morning after Townsend and Tyler's visit, Jack drove into Laramie to meet with Ms. Reeves, the lawyer, while Martha stayed with Abby and Hope at the ranch. The house felt oddly empty without Jack's steady presence. As Abby nursed Hope in the rocking chair by her bedroom window, she found her gaze repeatedly drawn to the driveway, watching for his return. "He'll be back soon enough," Martha said, entering with a cup of herbal tea for Abby. "Wearing a path in the floorboards with your eyes won't make him appear any faster." Abby accepted the tea with a grateful smile. "I know, I hate not knowing what's happening. What Ms. Reeves will say about the Hendersons' threats. Whether there's any way to save the ranch." Martha settled into the chair opposite, her normally stern expression softened as she watched Hope nurse. "You care about this place," she observed. "About Jack." "Of course I do," Abby replied. "Carson's Creek gave me a home when no one else would. And Jack," she trailed off, struggling to articulate the complex emotions she felt toward the man who had taken her in, delivered her baby, offered to adopt her. "Jack saved us, me and Hope. And you saved him right back," Martha said quietly. "This ranch has been in the Carson family for 3 generations. It's more than land and buildings to Jack. It's his heritage, his father's legacy, his grandfather's dream. Losing it would break something in him that might never heal." The weight of Martha's words settled over Abby like a physical presence. "Then we can't let that happen," she said, a new determination hardening her voice. "There has to be a way." "Perhaps," Martha agreed, though her tone suggested she wasn't convinced. "But sometimes life forces hard choices on us. Choices between what we want and what we need. Between holding on and letting go." Before Abby could respond, the sound of tires on gravel announced Jack's return. Martha rose, moving to the window. "That's not Jack's truck," she said, a note of wariness entering her voice. "That's a county sheriff's vehicle." Alarm shot through Abby. "The Hendersons, did they actually call child services already?" "Stay here," Martha instructed, already moving toward the door. "I'll handle this." Abby ignored the directive, carefully shifting Hope to her shoulder and following Martha downstairs. By the time they reached the front door, a middle-aged woman in a sheriff's deputy uniform was already mounting the porch steps. "Deputy Collins," Martha greeted, recognition in her voice. "What brings you out to Carson's Creek?" The deputy nodded politely. "Martha, I'm looking for Jack Carson. Is he around?" "He's in town on business," Martha replied. "Expected back this afternoon. Can I help with something?" Deputy Collins seemed to notice Abby and the baby for the first time. "You must be Abigail Jenkins," she said, her gaze assessing, but not unkind. "And this little one must be the newest addition to the ranch I've been hearing about." "Hope," Abby supplied instinctively, holding her daughter a little closer. "Hope Carson. Is something wrong, Deputy?" "Not wrong exactly," Deputy Collins hedged, "but I do need to speak with Jack as soon as possible. There's been a development he should know about." "What kind of development?" Martha pressed, her protective instincts clearly aroused. The deputy hesitated, then seemed to come to a decision. "I suppose you'll hear about it soon enough. Frank Henderson has filed a petition with the county family court on behalf of his son Tyler. They're seeking a paternity test and temporary visitation rights with the baby." Abby felt the blood drain from her face. "Already, but Hope is barely a week old." "The court moves quickly in cases involving infants," Deputy Collins explained, her tone apologetic, "especially when the petitioner has influence." "You mean when he's a state senator who can make or break careers with a phone call?" Martha said dryly. Deputy Collins didn't deny it. "I'm just here to deliver the court notice," she said, handing Martha an official-looking envelope. "The hearing is scheduled for Monday morning, 3 days away, just 1 day before the bank's deadline." "I'll make sure Jack gets this as soon as he returns," Martha assured the deputy, taking the envelope. Deputy Collins nodded, then turned to Abby. "For what it's worth, Ms. Jenkins, I've known Jack Carson for years. Whatever the court decides, you couldn't ask for a better advocate in your corner." After the deputy left, Abby sank onto the nearest chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "They're really doing it," she whispered, her voice tight with fear and anger. "They're trying to take Hope. They're trying to establish legal rights to her." Martha corrected, her voice calm despite the tension evident in her posture. "It's not the same thing as taking her." "Yet," Abby said bitterly, "it's not the same thing as taking her yet. But that's where this is heading, isn't it? They'll start with visitation, then push for partial custody, and eventually—" She couldn't bring herself to finish the thought. Martha sat across from her, unusually gentle. "You're getting ahead of yourself, Abby. 1 step at a time, remember. That's what Jack always says." Hope began to fuss, sensing her mother's distress. Abby forced herself to take deep, calming breaths as she soothed her daughter. "You're right," she acknowledged. 1 step at a time. First, we wait for Jack to get back and tell us what Ms. Reeves said. Then we deal with this court notice." Martha's eyes held a glimmer of approval. "That's the spirit. You're stronger than you know, Abby Jenkins. You and that little one both." When Jack returned late that afternoon, his expression grew grave as Martha handed him the court notice. He read it carefully, his jaw tightening with each line. "Did Ms. Reeves have any ideas about saving the ranch?" Abby asked anxiously once he had finished reading. Jack's gaze softened as he looked at her. "The ranch isn't your concern right now, Abby. He held up the court notice. "This is what we need to focus on." "But the deadline is still 4 days away," Jack finished for her. "Ms. Reeves is exploring some options. For now, we need to prepare for this hearing. The Hendersons are moving faster than we anticipated." "What did Ms. Reeves say about their chances?" Abby asked, dreading the answer. Jack's expression was carefully controlled. "She said paternity testing is standard in cases like this. If Tyler is confirmed as Hope's biological father, which we know he is, the court will likely grant him some form of visitation." "But he denied being her father for months," Abby protested, anger rising in her voice. "He abandoned us. And that will work in our favor when determining the extent of his rights," Jack assured her, "but it won't prevent them entirely. Not unless we can prove he would be a danger to Hope. Abby thought of Tyler's face as he had looked at his daughter, the genuine wonder, the hint of regret. As much as she wanted to paint him as a villain, the truth was more complicated. He had been a scared teenager who made a terrible choice, just as she had been a scared teenager who found herself pregnant and alone. "What do we do?" she asked, exhaustion evident in her voice. Jack's gaze was steady, reassuring. "We gather our evidence. We present our case. We show the court that Hope's best interests are served by remaining here with you, with limited and supervised contact with the Hendersons until they've proven themselves trustworthy." "And if that doesn't work," Abby pressed, "if they use their influence to get what they want, regardless of what's best for Hope?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Then we consider other options," he said finally. "But let's cross that bridge if we come to it. For now we focus on the hearing." The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Ms. Reeves arrived at the ranch to help them gather evidence and practice their testimony. Abby pulled out her notebook, sharing the letter she had written to Hope throughout her pregnancy, documenting Tyler's denial, her struggle to find a home, and eventually her life at Carson's Creek. "These are powerful," Mrs. Reeves observed as she read through the letters. "They show your consistent commitment to your child even when you were facing rejection and uncertainty. The court will respond to that." Meanwhile, Jack was working on a different front. Abby often saw him on the phone speaking in low, urgent tones with various contacts. When she asked what he was doing, he was evasive, saying only that he was exploring options for the ranch. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect summer day that seemed at odds with the tension gripping the household. Martha had prepared a special breakfast, but Abby found she couldn't eat, her stomach knotted with anxiety. "You need your strength," Martha admonished gently, "for Hope, if not for yourself." Abby managed a few bites of toast and eggs, more to appease Martha than from any real appetite. Jack, too, seemed preoccupied, his usual composure frayed around the edges as the bank deadline loomed just 1 day away. They were preparing to leave for the courthouse when the sound of an approaching vehicle caught their attention. Through the window, Abby saw a familiar red sports car pulling up beside Jack's truck. "Tyler," she said, her voice tight, "what's he doing here? The hearing isn't for another 2 hours." Jack moved to the door, his expression wary. "Let me handle this." But before he could step outside, Tyler was already mounting the porch steps, his movements urgent, almost frantic. He looked different from his previous visit, disheveled with dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept. "I need to talk to you," he said as Jack opened the door. "All of you, it's important." Jack regarded him skeptically. "We're due in court in 2 hours, Tyler. Whatever you have to say can be said there." "No, it can't," Tyler insisted, a note of desperation in his voice. "Please, 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Something in his tone must have convinced Jack, because after a moment's consideration, he stepped aside to allow Tyler into the house. Abby stood in the living room, Hope cradled protectively in her arms as Tyler entered. Martha positioned herself beside them, a silent sentinel radiating protective energy. Tyler's gaze immediately went to Hope, his expression softening. "She's gotten bigger," he observed, a hint of wonder in his voice. "Babies do that," Abby replied, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "What do you want, Tyler?" Tyler dragged his gaze from Hope to meet Abby's eyes. "I came to warn you about my father, about what he's really planning." Jack and Abby exchanged a quick glance, surprise and wariness mingling in their expressions. "Go on," Jack prompted, his voice carefully neutral. Tyler ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. "The custody petition, the visitation rights, that's just the beginning. Dad and Townsend have been working together for months. Townsend wants Carson's Creek for his resort development, and Dad wants a perfect family image for his campaign." "Campaign, Shipto," Abby echoed. "What campaign, Governor?" Tyler said flatly. "He's announcing his candidacy next month, and he needs a family-friendly image to counter some rumors that have been circulating." "What kind of rumors?" Jack asked, his attention sharpening. Tyler hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "There have been other girls," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Before Abby, girls who made accusations, who were paid off or intimidated into silence. Dad's always fixed it, made the problems go away. But with social media, with the Me Too movement, the old methods aren't working as well anymore." Abby felt sick. So I wasn't the first girl you assaulted. Tyler flinched at the direct accusation. I'm not proud of who I was, he said quietly. The entitlement, the disregard for others. I was raised to believe I could take what I wanted without consequences. And now, Jack prompted, now I'm trying to be better, Tyler said, meeting Jack's gaze directly, starting by warning you about what my father is really planning. He doesn't just want visitation rights with Hope. He wants full custody with you. He looked at Abby, painted as an unstable teenager unable to provide proper care. And he turned to Jack, portrayed as an inappropriate influence, a man with PTSD and a history of alcoholism who has no business raising a child. The calculated cruelty of the strategy took Abby's breath away. How do you know this? I overheard him talking to Townsend last night, Tyler explained. They think they have it all figured out. The court grants initial visitation, the bank forecloses on the ranch you are left homeless and vulnerable, and then they swoop in with a custody petition based on your inability to provide a stable home. Jack's expression had hardened with each word. And why are you telling us this? Tell her why betray your father's confidence. Tyler looked at Hope, his expression a complex mixture of regret and determination. Because she deserves better than to be a prop in my father's political theater. Because Abby deserves better than to have her child taken away after everything she's been through. He paused, swallowing hard. And because maybe if I start making the right choices now, someday I might actually deserve to be part of my daughter's life. The sincerity in his voice was impossible to fake. Abby felt her anger toward Tyler shift slightly, making room for a reluctant respect for this moment of courage, however belated. What are you suggesting we do? Jack asked, his tone still wary but less hostile. Fight back, Tyler said simply. Use what I've told you, and he hesitated, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital recorder. Use this. I recorded my father talking about his plans last night. It's all here, the manipulation of the court, the plan to use Hope as a campaign asset. Everything. He placed the recorder on the coffee table, his hand visibly trembling. This will probably destroy my relationship with my father, he acknowledged. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Abby stared at the recorder, then at Tyler. Why should we trust you? How do we know this isn't some trick, some strategy your father came up with? You don't, Tyler admitted. You have no reason to trust me after everything I've done, but that recording is real, and time is running out for both of us. A tense silence filled the room as they absorbed his words. Finally, Jack reached for the recorder. We'll listen to that, he said, and if what you say is true, we'll use it. But know this, Tyler, if this is some kind of trick, if you're playing games with Abby and Hope's future, there won't be a place on earth you can hide from me. The quiet certainty in Jack's voice sent a chill through the room. Tyler nodded once, accepting the warning. It's not a trick, he said. I'm trying to do one right thing after a lifetime of wrong ones. As he turned to leave, he paused, looking back at Hope. She really is beautiful, he said softly. She deserves parents who will put her needs first. I'm not there yet. I may never be. But at least I can make sure my father doesn't use her the way he's used everyone else in his life. After Tyler left, they gathered around the kitchen table to listen to the recording. Frank Henderson's voice, cultured and confident, filled the room. The strategy is simple. We get the initial visitation order tomorrow. By Tuesday, Carson will be facing foreclosure. Once they lose the ranch, we file for emergency custody based on their inability to provide a stable home. The judge owes me a favor. He'll expedite the process. Townsend's voice responded. And Carson, he won't go down without a fight. Everyone has vulnerabilities, Henderson replied smoothly. Carson is a decorated veteran, yes, but also a man with PTSD and a history of alcohol abuse. We emphasize the risk to the child, the instability of the environment. We portray the girl as a troubled teenager in over her head. By the time the media is done with the story I feed them, public opinion will be firmly on our side. And the child, Townsend asked, what role does she play in all this? Henderson's laugh was cold. The perfect campaign accessory, of course. My son stepping up to take responsibility for his child. Me, the devoted grandfather. Family values personified. The recording continued for several more minutes, outlining the details of their plan with chilling precision. When it finally ended, the kitchen was silent, except for Hope's soft cooing. "Well," Martha said finally, her voice tight with anger, "I believe that clears up any questions about their intentions." Ms. Reeves, who had arrived during Tyler's visit and listened to the recording with them, was already making notes. "This changes everything," she said, her usual professional calm giving way to excitement. "This is witness tampering, conspiracy to manipulate court proceedings, potential blackmail. Senator Henderson has overplayed his hand significantly." "Can we use this in court today?" Abby asked Hope, beginning to replace the fear that had gripped her since the deputy's visit. "Absolutely," Miss Reeves confirmed. "I'll need to authenticate the recording, but even without that, the mere existence of this evidence will force them to reconsider their strategy." Jack had been uncharacteristically quiet, his expression thoughtful. "And the ranch?" he asked finally. "The bank deadline is still tomorrow." Ms. Reeves's expression sobered. "One battle at a time, Jack. Let's secure Abby and Hope's future first. Then we can turn our attention to saving Carson's Creek." 2 hours later, they sat in the county courthouse, waiting for the hearing to begin. Tyler had arrived separately and was sitting alone on the opposite side of the room, pointedly distant from where his father and a team of expensive-looking lawyers were gathered. Frank Henderson exuded confidence, occasionally leaning over to confer with his legal team, seemingly unconcerned by the proceedings ahead. He had not acknowledged Tyler's presence with so much as a glance. When the bailiff called the case, Abby's hands trembled as she rose, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. Jack and Martha flanked her like protective sentinels as they moved to the front of the courtroom. Judge Barrett, a stern-looking man in his 60s, surveyed the assembled parties with a practiced eye. "I understand we're here to establish paternity and consider visitation rights for the minor child. Hope Jenkins," he began. "Hope Carson, Your Honor," Ms. Reeves corrected politely. "And before we proceed, there's a matter of significant concern that the court should be aware of." Judge Barrett raised an eyebrow. "Proceed, Ms. Reeves." With methodical precision, Ms. Reeves introduced the recording, explaining its provenance and contents. As the court listened to Frank Henderson's own voice, outlining his plan to manipulate the proceedings and use Hope as a political prop, the color drained from the senator's face. His lawyers huddled in urgent consultation, while Townsend, seated in the gallery, stared straight ahead, his expression frozen in a mask of practiced neutrality. When the recording ended, Judge Barrett's expression had darkened considerably. "Senator Henderson," he said, his voice cold with suppressed anger, "would you care to explain what we've just heard?" Henderson rose, his political instincts kicking in as he attempted to salvage the situation. "Your Honor, that recording is clearly edited and taken out of context. I'm simply a concerned grandfather seeking appropriate access to my grandchild." A concerned grandfather who refers to his grandchild as a campaign accessory. Judge Barrett's tone made it clear he wasn't buying the explanation. Before Henderson could respond, Tyler stood up from his seat, surprising everyone in the courtroom. "Your Honor, if I may," he said, his voice shaking slightly but determined. "I can confirm that the recording is authentic. I made it myself last night. Those are my father's exact words in context describing his plan to use Hope, my daughter, as a political prop." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Barrett gavelled for silence, his expression grave. "Mr. Henderson," he addressed Tyler, "you're willing to testify under oath that this recording is authentic and unaltered?" "Yes, Your Honor," Tyler replied without hesitation. "And I'm prepared to testify about other instances where my father has manipulated the legal system for political gain, including suppressing previous accusations against me." Senator Henderson's face contorted with rage. "Tyler, sit down," he hissed. "You have no idea what you're doing." "Actually, Dad," Tyler replied, meeting his father's gaze steadily, "for the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm doing." Judge Barrett studied the younger Henderson for a long moment, then nodded. "I appreciate your candor, Mr. Henderson. Given the serious nature of these allegations, this hearing will be continued until a full investigation can be conducted." He turned to address Ms. Reeves. "In the meantime, the minor child will remain in the custody of her mother with no visitation by the Henderson family pending the outcome of the investigation." Relief flooded through Abby so intense it made her knees weak. Jack's steadying hand on her shoulder kept her upright as Judge Barrett continued. "Furthermore," the judge added, his voice hardening, "I am referring this matter to the district attorney's office for possible criminal charges related to attempted witness tampering and conspiracy to commit fraud upon the court. He fixed Senator Henderson with a withering glare. The court does not look kindly on attempts to manipulate its proceedings, Senator, regardless of one's political connections. As the judge adjourned the hearing, Senator Henderson stormed out, followed by his legal team and a visibly shaken Townsend. Tyler remained behind, standing awkwardly at the edge of the gallery. Jack approached him first, extending his hand. "That took courage," he said simply. Tyler shook the offered hand, his expression a mixture of relief and trepidation. "It's the least I could do, after everything." "It's a start," Abby acknowledged, joining them with hope in her arms. "A good start." Tyler looked at his daughter, a sad smile touching his lips. "I don't expect forgiveness or even trust. Not yet. But I want to do better. To be better. For her sake, if nothing else." "One day at a time," Jack advised, the words carrying the weight of someone who had walked a similar path of redemption. "That's all any of us can do." Outside the courthouse, as they prepared to return to the ranch, Ms. Reeves pulled Jack aside for a private conversation. Abby watched them from a distance, noting the serious expressions on both their faces. "What was that about?" she asked when Jack rejoined them. "The ranch," Jack replied, his expression carefully neutral. "The bank deadline is still tomorrow, sus. Reeves is going to make some calls, see if today's developments might buy us some additional time." Despite the victory in court, a shadow still hung over their celebration. They had secured Hope's future, but the fate of Carson's Creek remained uncertain. That evening, as a golden sunset painted the western sky, Abby sat on the porch swing with Hope, treasuring the peace of the moment. After the tension of the past week, the simple act of rocking her daughter while watching the familiar landscape of the ranch felt like a luxury. Jack joined her, settling onto the swing with a tired sigh. "Martha's making dinner," he reported. "Said we deserved a proper celebration after today." Abby smiled, leaning slightly against his solid presence. "We won," she said, still marveling at the reality of it. "Hope is safe." "She is," Jack agreed, his weathered finger gently stroking Hope's cheek as she slept. "You did well today, Abby. I'm proud of you." The simple praise warmed her heart more than elaborate compliments could have. "I couldn't have done it without you, without all of this." She gestured at the ranch spread out before them, the pastures golden in the evening light. Jack's expression sobered. "About the ranch." Abby's heart sank. "The bank isn't going to extend the deadline, are they?" "No," Jack confirmed, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "Ms. Reeves tried, but the decision has already been made. Tomorrow at noon, if the payment isn't made, Carson's Creek goes into foreclosure." The weight of the news settled over them like a physical presence. Abby tried to imagine Carson's Creek without Jack or Jack without Carson's Creek. Neither image made sense. The man and the land were too deeply intertwined. "There has to be something we can do," she said, the same determination that had carried her through the court hearing rising again. "Some way to raise the money or negotiate with the bank." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "There is one option," he finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Townsend's offer is still on the table." "Sell the ranch." Abby couldn't keep the shock from her voice. "After everything that happened today, after what he tried to do to us with Henderson." "Not the whole ranch," Jack clarified. "Just the eastern section, about 50 acres. It's the part Townsend wants most for his resort project. It has the best views of the mountains and access to the creek. We'd keep the main house, the barn, the western pastures." Abby considered this, trying to understand the implications. "Would that be enough to pay off the bank?" "It would," Jack confirmed, "with some left over to reinvest in the remaining property. We'd have to scale back operations, run fewer cattle, but we'd still have a ranch, a home." The relief in his voice was palpable, and Abby realized what this compromise meant to him, the difference between losing a piece of his heritage and losing all of it. "Townsend agreed to this?" she asked, surprised that the developer would settle for less than the entire property. "Not yet," Jack admitted, "but Mrs. Reeves thinks he will, especially after today." Henderson was his ace in the hole for overcoming local zoning restrictions. With the senator now facing potential criminal charges, Townsend needs a win, even a partial one. Hope stirred in Abby's arms, making the soft snuffling sounds that preceded waking. "And you'd be okay with that?" Abby asked, gently rocking her daughter. "Selling part of Carson's Creek." Jack's gaze swept over the land, his expression a complex mixture of emotions. My grandfather used to say that sometimes you have to prune a tree to help it grow stronger, he said slowly. It's not what I want, but it's better than the alternative. He turned to look at Abby, his eyes softening. And some things are more important than land, even land that's been in the family for generations. The implication was clear. Abby and Hope had become his priority, his family in a way that transcended blood or tradition. Then we'll make the offer, Abby said decisively. And if Townsend turns it down, we'll find another way. Together. Jack's smile, rare and genuine, transformed his weathered features. Together, he agreed. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect summer day that showcased Carson's Creek at its best. Jack was up early on the phone with Ms. Reeves to discuss their proposal to Townsend. By mid-morning, a meeting had been arranged at the lawyer's office in Laramie. Are you sure you don't want me to come with you? Abby asked as Jack prepared to leave. Better if I handle this part, Jack replied, his expression resolute. Townsend respects a certain kind of negotiation, direct business-like. No emotions. Abby nodded, understanding. Jack was playing to his strengths, using his quiet authority and deep knowledge of the land to secure the best possible deal. Besides, he added with a small smile, you and Hope have more important things to do today. Abby raised an eyebrow. We do. Martha will explain, Jack said cryptically. I should be back by mid-afternoon, hopefully with good news. After he left, Martha appeared with a mysterious smile and a large box. Jack asked me to give you this, she said, placing the box on the kitchen table. Said it was time. Curious, Abby opened the box to find an array of fresh paints, brushes, stencils, and decorative items. A note in Jack's neat, precise handwriting lay on top. Abby hopes nursery needs finishing. I know you've been wanting to work on it, but we've been a bit distracted. Thought today might be a good day to make it happen, regardless of what comes next. Jack, tears sprang to Abby's eyes at the simple thoughtfulness of the gesture. Since Hope's unexpected early arrival, the baby had been sleeping in a bassinet in Abby's room. The nursery, a small room adjacent to Abby's bedroom that Jack had cleared out months ago, remained unfinished, a project repeatedly postponed by more urgent concerns. He bought all this last week, Martha said, her usual reserve softening. Said Hope deserved a proper nursery no matter what happened with the ranch. The revelation touched Abby deeply. Even in the midst of potentially losing his family's heritage, Jack had been thinking of Hope's comfort of creating a space that would be uniquely hers. Well, Abby said, wiping away her tears and summoning a smile, I guess we have a nursery to decorate. The project proved to be exactly what Abby needed, a constructive distraction from the anxiety of waiting for news about the ranch. With Martha's help, she painted the walls a soft sage green, stenciled delicate wildflowers along the border, and arranged the furniture Jack had quietly been collecting over the past months, a sturdy crib, a changing table, a bookshelf already filled with children's books. Hope supervised from her bouncy seat, occasionally offering what Abby chose to interpret as approving gurgles. By early afternoon, the nursery had transformed from an empty shell into a warm, welcoming space that reflected both the ranch's natural beauty and Abby's own creative touch. It's perfect, Martha declared as they stood back to admire their work. Jack will be pleased. The mention of his name brought Abby's thoughts back to the meeting with Townsend. I hope it's going well, she said, glancing at the clock. He should be back soon. As if summoned by her words, the sound of Jack's truck approaching reached them. Abby moved to the window, trying to read his expression as he parked and climbed out. His face gave nothing away, the same composed, controlled demeanor he always presented to the world. Heart pounding, Abby met him at the door. Well, she asked, unable to wait for the news. Jack stood on the threshold, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that took her breath away. For a long moment, he said nothing, and Abby feared the worst. Then slowly a smile spread across his face, not the small, restrained upturn of lips she was accustomed to, but a full, genuine smile that transformed his entire countenance. It's done, he said simply. Townsend accepted our offer. Carson's Creek is safe. Relief and joy exploded through Abby with such force that she launched herself into Jack's arms without thinking. He caught her, his strong arms wrapping around her in a rare display of physical affection. We did it, she whispered against his shoulder. We really did it. We did, Jack agreed, his voice rough with emotion. The ranch is smaller now, but it's still ours, still home. Martha appeared in the hallway, Hope in her arms, her usually stern expression softened by a smile. I take it the news is good. Jack nodded reluctantly, releasing Abby to include Martha in the moment of celebration. Townsend accepted our terms. We keep the house, the barn, the western pastures, about 150 acres in all. He gets the eastern section for his resort. And the bank, Martha pressed. Satisfied, Jack confirmed. The payment has been made with enough left over to invest in some improvements for what remains of the ranch. He glanced at Abby. I was thinking we might expand the greenhouse operation, make Carson's Creek Organics a more significant part of our business model. The casual use of "our" wasn't lost on Abby. Despite all the uncertainty of the past weeks, Jack had never stopped thinking of the ranch as their shared future, their joint endeavor. I'd like that, she said, warmth spreading through her at the thought of building something lasting together. There's something else, Jack added, his expression turning more serious. Something I wanted to discuss with both of you. He gestured toward the living room. Perhaps we should sit down. Concerned by his tone, Abby followed him, taking hope from Martha and settling onto the sofa with her daughter in her arms. Martha took the armchair opposite her, expression curious but not alarmed. Jack remained standing, his posture straight as always, but with an uncharacteristic hint of nervousness in his movements. The past few weeks have made me realize something important. He began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. Life is unpredictable. Things we take for granted can change in an instant. He moved to stand before Abby, his gaze meeting hers directly. When I first offered to adopt you, Abby, it was about providing stability, ensuring you had a permanent home regardless of what happened with the ranch or as the Hendersons. But it's become about much more than that. Jack knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with Abby and Hope. I've spent most of my adult life trying not to care too deeply about anything or anyone. It seemed safer that way after everything I saw in the war. But you changed that, you and Hope. You made me remember what it means to have a family, to have something worth fighting for. Tears welled in Abby's eyes as Jack continued, his voice growing more certain with each word. I've already spoken with Ms. Reeves. The adoption paperwork is ready. If you still want to, if you're still sure we can make it official, not because you need a guardian anymore, but because I would be honored to call you my daughter. The simple sincerity of the offer broke something open inside Abby, a final wall she hadn't even realized was still standing. For so long, she had been careful not to want too much, not to hope too deeply, knowing that such feelings only made the inevitable disappointment more painful. But looking into Jack's steady blue eyes, seeing the unguarded emotion there, Abby finally allowed herself to believe in permanence. To believe that some things, some people really could be counted on to stay. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. Yes, I'm sure. Jack's smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Then it settled. He gently touched Hope's cheek, the baby instinctively grasping his finger with her tiny hand. And you, little one, are officially Hope Carson, granddaughter of the most stubborn rancher in Wyoming. Martha, who had been watching the exchange with uncharacteristic softness in her expression, cleared her throat. Well, she said briskly, though her voice was suspiciously thick, I think this calls for a proper celebration, and I believe Abby has something to show you, Jack. Grateful for the reminder, Abby wiped away her tears and stood. We've been busy while you were gone, she said, a smile breaking through her emotional haze. Come see. She led Jack upstairs to the newly decorated nursery. As he took in the transformed space, the soft green walls, the wildflower stencils, the carefully arranged furniture, something in his controlled expression cracked, revealing a depth of emotion he rarely allowed himself to show. It's perfect, he said quietly, his voice rough. Just perfect. It needs one more thing, Abby said, moving to the dresser where she had left a framed photograph, one Martha had taken of the three of them shortly after Hope's birth. Jack was holding the newborn with a mixture of awe and tenderness, while Abby leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but radiant. It captured perfectly the moment when they had truly become a family. Jack took the frame, studying the image with a soft expression. Where should we put it? Here, Abby decided, placing it on the wall shelf above the crib. So it's the first thing she sees when she wakes up, a reminder that she's loved, that she belongs. As they stood together in the nursery, the late afternoon sun casting golden light through the windows, Abby felt a sense of completion that had eluded her for most of her life. Carson's Creek wasn't just a place to stay anymore. It was home. Jack and Martha weren't just people who had taken her in, they were family. And hope wasn't just her responsibility. She was their shared joy, their future. Thank you, she said softly, leaning against Jack's solid presence. For everything. For seeing something in me worth saving when no one else did. Jack's arm around her shoulders was steady and sure. We saved each other, he replied, echoing her words from the night of Hope's birth. And that's what family does. It saves you even when you don't know you need saving. 3 years later, Abby stood at the edge of the University of Wyoming campus and Laramie Hope's small hand clasped firmly in hers. At 20, Abby had grown into a confident young woman whose calloused hands and sun-weathered complexion spoke of her ranch upbringing, while the acceptance letter to the university's veterinary program, in her other hand, represented dreams transformed into reality. Mama, why are we here? 3-year-old Hope asked, her dark eyes curious as she took in the bustling campus around them. Because Mama's going to school to learn how to help sick animals get better, Abby explained, kneeling down to Hope's level. Just like we help the animals at the ranch. Hope's face lit up with understanding. Like when Spirit hurt his leg and you made him all better. Exactly like that, sweetheart. The mention of Spirit brought a smile to Abby's face. The once wary stallion had become her special project in the years since Hope's birth. With patience and consistent kindness, she had gradually earned his trust, eventually healing his injured leg completely. Now he was the gentlest mount on the ranch, particularly with Hope, who had inherited her mother's natural affinity for animals. Dr. Abigail Carson, Jack said, appearing behind them with a proud grin. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Abby laughed, standing and adjusting the backpack that contained Hope's snacks and toys for the day. Let's get through veterinary school first. But yes, it does sound pretty good. The past 3 years had seen significant changes at Carson's Creek. The eastern section of the ranch had been transformed into an upscale eco-resort, bringing new visitors and revenue to the area. To everyone's surprise, Townsend had approached Jack about a partnership rather than just a land purchase, recognizing that the authentic ranch experience was a valuable asset for his guests. The arrangement had worked out better than anyone expected. Carson's Creek Organics had expanded, supplying the resort's restaurant with fresh produce and becoming a respected brand in local farmers markets. Jack had gradually scaled back the cattle operation, focusing instead on sustainable agriculture and education. The ranch now hosted regular workshops on organic farming techniques, with Abby often leading sessions on herb cultivation and animal care. Martha had softened over the years, her stern exterior giving way to a dry humor and unexpected warmth, especially with Hope. She had finally shared her photo albums of Caroline, allowing Hope to know something of the daughter she had lost and forging a deeper connection with Abby in the process. And Tyler Henderson had kept his word, maintaining a respectful distance while gradually earning a place in Hope's life. He visited the ranch once a month, spending supervised time with his daughter and contributing financially to her care without attempting to impose his or his family's influence. His relationship with his father remained strained, especially after Frank Henderson's political career imploded following the courthouse revelations. But Tyler seemed genuinely committed to building a better life, one worthy of the daughter he was slowly coming to know. The orientation session for new veterinary students was held in a large lecture hall filled with incoming students from across the country. Abby looked around at her classmates, many of whom appeared to be fresh out of undergraduate programs, with no life experience beyond academia. She felt simultaneously older and younger than everyone around her, a young mother who had packed more real-world experience into her 20 years than most people accumulated in a lifetime, yet still at the beginning of her professional journey. Welcome to the University of Wyoming College of Veterinary Medicine, announced Dr. Sarah Williams, the admissions director. You are the select few who have been chosen from thousands of applicants. Each of you brings unique experiences and perspectives that will enrich this program. Abby's hand unconsciously moved to the locket around her neck, a gift from Jack on the day her adoption was finalized. Inside were 3 pictures, one of Jack with his father and grandfather on the ranch decades ago, one of Abby holding newborn Hope, and a recent addition from Hope's 3rd birthday party, showing the 3 of them together on the porch of Carson's Creek. As Dr. Williams continued her presentation about the rigorous 4-year program ahead, Abby felt a mixture of excitement and gratitude. The path that had brought her here from a pregnant, homeless teenager to a university student with a loving family had been far from straight or easy. But every twist and turn, every challenge and triumph had shaped her into the person she was meant to be. After the orientation, Abby walked across campus to the childcare center where Hope would spend her days while Abby attended classes. The facility was bright and welcoming, with play areas designed to stimulate learning and creativity. Through the window, Abby watched as Hope immediately gravitated toward a corner filled with toy animals, carefully examining a plush horse's leg as if checking for injury. "She's going to fit right in," observed Jennifer Martinez, the center director. "We love having the children of veterinary students here. They tend to be remarkably nurturing toward animals." "She's grown up on a ranch," Abby explained with pride. "She's been around animals her whole life. Sometimes I think she understands them better than she understands people. That's a gift that will serve her well whatever she chooses to do with her life." As Abby drove them back to the ranch that evening, Hope chattering excitedly about her day at the childcare center, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. The scared, rejected teenager who had arrived at Carson's Creek pregnant and hopeless had grown into a woman with clear goals and the determination to achieve them. The ranch looked exactly the same as it had that first day, yet entirely different through Abby's transformed perspective. What had once seemed like an intimidating alien landscape now felt like the foundation from which she could build anything she wanted. Jack was waiting on the porch when they pulled up, his tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. Hope squealed with delight at the sight of her grandfather squirming in her car seat in her eagerness to reach him. Grandpa, I met new friends today." Jack scooped her up as soon as Abby freed her from the car seat, swinging her high in the air before settling her on his hip. "Did you now tell me all about them?" As Hope launched into an excited account of her day, Jack caught Abby's eye over her daughter's head. "How was it?" he asked simply, "overwhelming and exciting and terrifying all at once." Abby admitted, falling into step beside him as they headed toward the house where the scent of Martha's cooking drifted from the open windows. "But good, really good." Jack nodded, understanding in his gaze. "You're going to make an exceptional veterinarian, Abby. You've got the heart for it in the hands. The rest is just details." The simple vote of confidence delivered without fanfare or exaggeration warmed Abby more than elaborate praise could have. From Jack, such words were gold valuable precisely because they were never spent carelessly. That evening, after Hope was tucked into bed in her beloved nursery, Abby found herself drawn to the porch. The night was clear, the vast Wyoming sky ablaze with stars, the air carrying the familiar sense of sage and pine that had become the backdrop of her life. Jack joined her after a while, settling into the porch swing beside her with a contented sigh. "Good day," he asked. "The best," Abby confirmed, leaning slightly against his solid presence. "I keep thinking about how differently things could have turned out. If you hadn't seen my file, if you hadn't decided to take a chance on a pregnant teenager no one else wanted." Jack was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains silhouetted against the starlit sky. "I think some people are meant to find each other," he said finally. "Not by blood or chance, but by choice. By recognizing something in another person that calls to something in yourself." The simple wisdom of his words resonated deeply with Abby. For so long, she had felt like an outsider, a misfit, someone who didn't quite belong anywhere. But here on this porch under the sky, she had found her place, not because it had been given to her, but because she had chosen it, fought for it, made it her own. "I used to think I was broken," she admitted softly, "that there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made me unlovable. Every foster home that didn't work out, every family that rejected me because of the pregnancy, they all reinforced that belief." Jack's arm around her shoulders was warm and steady. And now, Abby looked out over the pastures, where she had learned to work cattle, at the barn, where she had discovered her love of healing animals, at the land that had become as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. "Now I know that I wasn't broken," she said with quiet certainty. "I was just waiting for the right place to heal, the right people to heal with." As the evening star appeared above the mountains, bright and steady against the darkening sky, Abby felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here, not despite its difficulties, but because of them. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of doubt had been a necessary step toward the life she now cherished. Carson's Creek had given her more than just a place to stay when she needed it most. It had given her a home, a family, a purpose. And in return, she had given the ranch new life, new energy, new possibilities for the future. Some might call it coincidence or luck, or simply the unpredictable nature of life's twists and turns. But sitting on that porch with Jack beside her and Hope sleeping peacefully upstairs, Abby preferred to think of it as something more meaningful, the natural result of two wounded souls recognizing in each other the possibility of healing and having the courage to reach for it. In the end, that was what Carson's Creek had always been about. Not just land and buildings, cattle and crops, but the deeper, more enduring legacy of finding home in the most unexpected places and family in the most unlikely people. And that Abby knew with absolute certainty was a legacy worth preserving for generations to come.